All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the work session for the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, November 13, 2023. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bowen.
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni. Councilmember Nyan.
Here.
Councilmember Farmer.
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Here.
Councilmember Rambo.
Here.
Councilmember Flasher.
Here.
Councilmember Garitano. Councilmember Brost.
Here.
Councilmember Edens.
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Here.
Councilmember Marshall. Councilmember Jaxie. Councilmember Hopper.
Here.
Councilmember Galani.
All right, welcome everyone. Good to see you. We have 22 items under information before we go to action. Does anyone have anything that they want to discuss or about which you may have questions under the informational items? And just so you know, once we clear that with all of you, I'm going to ask our city administrator to give us a brief summary of our waste hauler performance thus far. So you can skip that one if that was on your mind. Is there anything else that anyone, Councilmember Clark?
Just one thing on the number 4E1 is the master plan for the watershed erosion. And just a suggestion that maybe to rethink that study area list and put it into some pillars, because it seemed a little bit all over the board. And if it was grouped with, you know, like whatever's the background, whatever's the control plan, different things, so it was grouped, it would be a little easier to read and follow.
You good with that, Mr. Vintage?
Yes, sir. If I have any questions, I'll contact Ms. Clark directly. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Anything else, Councilmember Edens?
Yes, I was just wondering if in addition to the holiday tree lighting, we were going to have our farmers market do the winter market again this year on the same day, and if it would be possible. Have we thought about combining those events?
Mr. Vintage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Edens, we did have the winter market already that occurred on November 4th and was led by Natalie McAvoy, the farmers market manager. Miss McAvoy is helping us with the holiday tree lighting and trying to identify potential vendors and others that can participate. So we may be able to kind of merge the two, but the holiday tree lighting will primarily be that event for the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else under information? All right. Mr. Lee, would you like to give us a summary briefly of where we are in terms of performance with our new waste haulers?
Of course. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Generally, the city has been serviced by 2 new waste haulers since the beginning of August 2023. They began servicing us on August 1st. Those 2 new haulers are Republic Services and Gateway Disposal. Since that transition, excluding the month of August as the transition was occurring, you know, there is expected miss pickups during that period of time. We've presented tonight pretty much a list of miscollections, if you will, that have been reported to the city during that time period, but also the 3 months leading into the transition. And interestingly, you'll see that there was quite a few more individual reports of miscollections during the months of May, June, and July as we were gearing up for the transition. And now since September and October, we had 9 by both haulers in September, and then 0 actually from Gateway in the month of October. They did all of this while also collecting over 10,000 old trash carts while doing their regular services. And overall, after talking with residents, they do seem very happy with the overall service being provided here. The main piece here that to focus on is that a lot of individuals were a little upset at the beginning with the size of the carts. Luckily, our haulers have made a pretty good effort of going out and switching those carts out with the smaller 48-gallon and sometimes the 35-gallon when necessary. But overall, I'd say performance has definitely increased, and the number of calls coming to City Hall has decreased as well. And the department's available for any questions this time.
All right. Sounds like a good report. Any questions for our city administrator? Councilmember Ottenberg?
I would just add on to what Mr. Lee just told us and just say that from my vantage point, I feel that my residents in the Ward 3 are very happy with the service from Republic. And they especially appreciate the fact that both trash and recycling are picked up on the same day. So although there was a little bit of growing pains, you might say, with the transition, since it's settled down a bit, everyone seems very happy with the service.
Okay, anything else? All right, excellent. All right, that takes us into action items. And the first is utilization of settlement funds. And this has to do with the subject that was postponed from the last meeting, the $1,010,000 that we received from the Spectrum class action. The decision or the matter was postponed to give us time to get some study done, a study done relative to our reserves. That's where the discussion ended. And so, as you know from one of my mayor's reports a few weeks ago, I asked our new city treasurer to take a look at that and to give us an opinion on it relative to our reserves. And he is with us this evening. Thank you so much, Mr. Segori, for being with us. And did everyone get his summary? Okay. Are there any questions about that? Councilmember Marshall.
But we are operating at a 25% based on it. Yes, we're operating on a 25% based on the council's direction from 2011 or something like that. Is that correct?
That is correct. We have a 25% contingency.
Correct.
Councilmember Brose.
Yeah, I found the information helpful. I think this looks out at, if we were to call ourselves an industry, it looks out at the industry. But from my standpoint, to determine the adequacy of our reserves, we have to look in. And I think that's the part we also talked about with respect to, funding plans, where, internet's a big one, but we seem to be moving forward. The next one would be, erosion and onward. So I think we just have to have a consensus on that. And then I think it's always good to compare ourselves to the industry, but we're probably different than most cities. So, but that's, I found it informative to read it. So thank you.
And for the benefit of our residents, Mr. Segori, if you would mind coming forward just for a minute, I've got some what I call layman questions for you.
Certainly.
And I really only have two. The first one is, what amount of reserves does the city have at the moment?
Well, the unassigned fund balance as of 12/31/22, which is the last audited numbers, was $18.3 million.
Okay, 18.3. And based
And that's
on,
not inclusive of the 1,010,000 from Spectrum.
correct. It sort of got all this started. Okay, thank you for that. And then my second of my two questions is based on your analysis and the industry standards that you've put forth, what is the, you can answer it however you want, low, mid, or high range, or just high range, or what you would recommend, or whatever amount of reserves the city would maintain per those standards?
Well, so some of the rating agencies, Moody's, for example, has a minimum of 5% of revenues. S&P indicates that greater than 15% of revenues is a very strong reserve. And then the Government Financial Association officers indicates 3 months of expenditures is a good contingency fund. When you look at those, whether it's 15% of revenue, 1.8 million. Again, this is as of 12/31/22, not inclusive of the settlement funds. 15% of revenue is 1.8 million. 10% of expenditures, let's call it 1.2 million. And then the most conservative would be 3 months of expenditures, or as we have in 2011, we call it a proposition for the city. 25% is what we have, and so at that 2.917 is the is the number as of 12/31/22, and looking at the budget for the year, somewhere just a little north of 3 million. So
Okay.
with 18 million, we are well above what the industry says we should have.
Right. And I said I had two questions. I actually have a third.
Okay.
And this is just for edification, clarification, rather, for anyone on the bench, but particularly people who may be watching our residents. So if we take the most conservative at the 25%, the spread would leave us with approximately, and that would require 3 billion in reserves. So the difference would be 15 million additional that we have reserved, correct?
Well,
Right.
if you look at at 20, if we're using 24 budget, about 3 million of the 12,369,000 in expenditures, that's budgeted expenditures. Our beginning fund of 19,000,005. So we'd have just a little bit more than 16 million additional.
Okay. So I was off. I was under a little more than 16 million. Okay. Any other questions for Councilmember Ottenberg?
So if we take a look at the recommendations based on the research that you did with those various agencies and the minimums, we could essentially double them and we would still have far in excess of the amounts that we would need in the unassigned reserve. Is that correct? Am I saying that right?
If we were to spend, from my vantage point, it seems like there's plenty.
Okay.
And again, it's when you look at reserves, there's, what's the appropriate reserve for a city? You need to have what you need for contingencies, but if you have too much, the analysis that was done many years ago indicated having too much is not a good thing either.
Why is that? If I may follow up. Why is that? Just out of curiosity, having too much is not a good thing.
Having too much, because you could be utilizing it on residents and you could be spending it on for the benefit of the city.
Anything else, Councilmember Ottenberg?
No, thank you.
Councilmember Edens?
Yes, thank you for your assessment. It is helpful to compare ourselves to other cities and to understand what that minimum threshold is for contingency funds. I will just say, and you've confirmed this, we've talked about this before as a city, that we have done an extraordinarily good job of planning for a rainy day. When I go to the Missouri Municipal League conferences, I have to say most cities are not in the same shape that we are. This is a privilege to even have this conversation at all. And that's been to a credit to the staff and the people that have been elected that have come before me. So a big thank you to the way we have ran things before. One thing I didn't really see in your report is sort of a estimation of those projects where we would be using funds that we don't necessarily have to sit on. This is coming from discussions that I've been a part of, for example, on watershed erosion, where estimates are eye-watering. I heard the number thrown out 30 million by one expert that we had as a consultant at one time. So I guess my point is, yes, we certainly have extra money to spend, but we also have projects in the docket that we have had prioritized for a number of years, and we haven't been spending on those. So my thought process is similar in that, I applaud the mayor for wanting to give money back to the residents, and I think we can do that, but by spending it on projects that our residents have asked for, I think it goes a little bit further, right? So we just had a discussion about the Village Green recently, but we didn't choose the most expansive form of that project because it was $1 million more than we wanted to spend. So we chose to build a scaled back version of that park. I've gone to a lot of meetings with residents where I've looked them in the face and said, we don't have money to spend on erosion in this area. And so it feels like, talking out of both sides in that regard. So my thought process is, we can always do something like this with a rebate in the future. It doesn't have to be off the table forever. But what we need to do is go ahead, and if we have extra money that we don't need to sit on, which I believe that we do, is let's spend it on those things like public safety and I would argue that erosion is. And let's finish the projects that we've already committed first, like rural internet expansion. And then we'll see where we're at and how comfortable we are with taking more money out and giving it away, maybe as a rebate in the future. But the way I see it is we sort of have a covenant with our residents. We told them, you know, we're going to do these projects for you. They need it for their quality of life. We've ranked it as the #1 priority. We have to spend the money anyway, but we have all of these other needs that are going to be millions and millions of dollars, right? So yes, there's other agencies that will maybe help pay if they find a money tree as well. But at the end of the day, for example, we own 13 acres with heavy erosion. That's ours to maintain, no matter what, near Anniversary Park. The rural internet, we still have to get done. So I would love to see what I talked about last month, is that this money that we got from Spectrum go towards phase 2 Spectrum needs. Then we reassess the additional money that we need for these other major projects. So we know we need some bridge replacements. We've got watershed. And, you know, we have public safety street improvements. And then if there's still money that we feel is a lot left over, we've got far exceeding that 25% operating budget, that's when we talk about trash rebates. So I'd like to make a motion again that money goes towards phase 2. That's the #1 priority of the council. We owe our residents this. Let's get it done.
What is your motion again, Councilmember Edens?
Yes, my motion is that the Spectrum settlement goes towards phase 2. And I will say as a reminder as well, the estimate for phase 2 is significantly higher than we expected it to be before. Our new city administrator has been very good about communicating that with administration and public works. And so we will still have a couple of $1 million potentially come out of reserves in addition to the settlement just to pay for phase 2. So the money goes very quickly. Greetings from a vacation in California where all of the houses start at very, very high prices, right? So I know we think we have a lot of money, but it's going to go very quickly for municipal sized projects. So keep that in mind too. We blink and we sneeze and a bridge costs $5 million, right? So thanks.
Is there a second to the motion? Second by Councilmember Rambo. I have a couple of questions. Well, actually, I guess first is just a point of information. My recollection from our last meeting, when we asked the city administrator what the cost of the second phase of our rural internet project would be, is that his answer was, and I don't say this negatively, it was speculative because we don't have the number from Spectrum yet. So I don't think we can say tonight that it is X or Y. Second, isn't it also the case that there's a new federal program that we're going to be applying for?
Yes, yes, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. It is the BEAD program, and there are funds that are available through that. We've already been communicating with the state for that. The first round would go out in January with the applications January, February, and the first awards would probably be awarded by August at the earliest, maybe September of 2024.
And then back to my first question, your high end, my recollection of, which was speculative of the potential highest cost for that, even if we didn't have money that we could get from the new federal program, would be far less than the 16 million we have in reserves. Is that right?
That is correct. It would be this is speculative. It would be anywhere between 2 to 3 million potentially.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, you know, I want us to do phase 2 as well. But my only concern is we haven't seen any kind of a plan to look at to see what are the milestones involved in this, what's involved, how long will it take, and we don't have any measure of this project's attributes. So I don't feel like we're at the point that we can determine how much that's going to cost, how long it's going to take. how much we can do each year, what we're capable of. So we don't have a first time through capability study done yet. It's my
Councilor McCutcheon.
Yeah, I understand that internet's our number one priority, but we have spent a substantial amount of money on internet. I know the need for internet, but I also know that we have residents who, have other projects that are just as important to them. I can't support this money going to internet. I can support it going to the Watershed Erosion Committee. That is something that affects our whole city that we have not spent a substantial amount of money on.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes, Councilmember Edens is right. There are a number of projects that this city will be dealing with as time goes on. In fact, there'll never be an end to the projects that the city will have to deal with. And we have the opportunity right now to provide some relief to our residents for the unexpected increases in the trash bills that they saw when we changed vendors. If we choose not to rebate this money back to the residents, it goes into the reserve fund, and then our reserve fund gets that much larger. As the city treasurer has pointed out, we have more than enough in excess in our reserve fund right now, that when the timing is right, and once we've done the study, and once we've gathered all the information, then we can allocate some of those funds to take care of the high-speed internet phase 2. And then we would also have the funding there to start to address some of the erosion issues that we know we have to deal with. I know we talked in the last year, we were hopeful that we would get about $500,000 from the state. That didn't come through. Well, I know that talking with city administrator, not to put him on the spot, but we did some back of the napkin calculations on how much we thought phase 2 of the internet project might cost. And we came up with a rough figure of around $2 to $3 million. Okay, we could easily take that $2 to $3 million from the reserve fund, as well as $500,000 for erosion. Those are our top 2 strategic issues. And we could do that when the time comes. And right now, we could provide some relief to our residents, all of our residents in the city, and they definitely need it. Thank you.
Councilor Dodwell. Councilor Marshall.
Yeah, I guess this is a question for the attorney. Capital projects. We talked internet as capital project, and certainly water erosion would be a capital project. Under our charter, are we not required to go to the voters for over 3.2 million for any kind of a capital project?
For anything over 3.2 million is the base. There is a increase percentage based on CPI, if I remember correctly. But yes, that is correct.
So any of the money that we would take and put towards a project, regardless of whether it's our money or not, if it's a capital project, it would require us going to the voters to get approval for that.
Correct.
Thank
Well,
you.
no, I'm sorry. It would have to be monies collected from tax revenue.
Which this is, our excess reserve is.
The excess reserve is, yes.
That's all I'm saying is we just can't take the money and go paying for big projects based on the way I understand the charter. So it's not something we make a decision tonight and try to do it. It should be prioritizing and then laying it out, because those ones that will hit, and it's not just the new cost, it's what we've put into that project already. So like with the internet, we put several $100,000 into rural internet before we ever got the grants from that. But if we go to put more money against that, those initial monies have to be included in that total cap of the progressively probably 3.3 now or something like that.
Well, I can't speak to the total allocation of funds and whether or not they would necessarily be included. If the entirety of the funds for a project, and you're correct that you can't do cumulative amounts of lesser amounts to avoid the election requirement, but you are correct in stating that of those funds that are tax funds received by the city would require voter approval if they exceed that charter amount.
Thank you.
Saw him. Councilor Galani.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up, I think when we've got all this significant excess in reserve funds and how we're going to look at allocating it, spending it, and figuring that, I think we got to be careful as far as the precedent we set on what projects that this money goes to, because what actually is the responsibility of government to take care of versus what is not. And we start paying for certain things. And once again, we set the precedent that that's expected to be paid for by the city in the future. And I know this was a debate we had whenever we decided to fund the internet project originally. And the reason we agreed to pay the amount of money we did was because of the ARPA funds we were getting from the federal government, not because we thought the city should be on the hook for $7 or $8 million to put internet out there without some type of recoupment. So I think with all of these different projects that's the case. And there's residents, to Councilmember McCutcheon's point, that feel strongly about other projects versus this one if they don't benefit directly from that project. So I think it's important that we keep that in mind as we decide how to allocate and disperse these monies that are in excess. But at the end of the day, I also think that when you give money back to the residents, and that's inclusive of all the residents, as the proposed trash rebate program would be, with this small amount of the excess money we have, there really can't be any argument there, because you're giving money back to everybody in the city and everybody's benefiting from it. And with the increased costs of the trash that a lot of residents voiced their disdain for initially, I think, like I said, it's turned out to be a great thing that we did. But with the inflation environment, especially this time of the year, I think giving that rebate back is something that would be a great gesture for the residents of the city. And it's a small token and everybody benefits from it. So it's not certain residents in this ward or that ward or this particular project or that. So I would support that we would go that direction versus putting it towards another project at this time. Thanks.
City Administrator Lee.
Thank you, Mayor. I did just want to mention as well, and this was under the memorandum for this, which is that we do have one council meeting left this year in December, and come January 1st, the monies received from the settlement, they will go into the reserve. So in any form, we would need an ordinance passed to encumber these funds for whatever use we would like to use it for. So just making sure that if we would like to use them for any project, we would want to get some kind of direction tonight to prepare legislation for introduction in December.
I was just getting ready to say that. Yes, procedurally, it would be best to have this decided. Didn't want to say that earlier to in any way bridle the discussion. Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, my goal in seconding this Ms. Eden's motion was actually to be prudent with a $1.1 million windfall, because I think internet is the right place to put it. The target is open to discussion, but we made a commitment to residents for ubiquitous, decent internet service, and this money came from past telecom overcharges. So it feels like it fits to me, but I'm all for making gestures to residents. There'll be some new folks that benefit without having felt the pain of prior of increases from prior trash hauling costs. And there are some folks in my ward, at least, that have completely canceled their service because they're disgusted with the increase. But I feel like if we're giving most of the folks $5 for the first year off their bill, $3 for the second year every month off their bill, that's not going to help very many people. It is a great gesture, but it's actually 266,000 individual gestures to the residents, and that's really fragmenting this windfall. And I think we should use it for something that's that seems more productive than just a little grant.
So I think the intent would be to do it in not more than 1 year.
The write-up said,
yeah,
you may know what the write-up
said. And then you caused me to think of a question. To the city administrator, I know we've had some discussions if the council were to do the rebate program as to what ability that might give the city to leverage its position with the trash haulers relative to things like getting their agreement that they would not do a price increase at the next opportunity they might have. And I think something else you mentioned, would you mind with the consent of the council to give everyone your thoughts on that?
Yes,
Please.
thank you, Mayor. Yes, there's two things here. So contractually, there is an ability for the haulers to do a hike after the first year. It is capped, unless there's an extreme circumstance with gas or something like that. That being said, what we could do is with a motion from the council, if the department was able to make that contact, we would try to pretty much make $5 turn into maybe $6. So with the guaranteed revenue making up potentially a fourth of the cost for at least a year and then a little bit less for the next. That does help them streamline their billing processes, which then should take a little bit of gruff off their labor and having to pay off the individuals that would do collections. So in this case, we would try to employ the two haulers to make this money count for more because it's guaranteed revenue. They would be paid on a quarterly, biannual, or yearly basis. So that would be reported in the legislation. There would be a memorandum attached to what exactly this has been stretched to, if it is at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. I am sure I'm going to muck this up when I say this, so forgive me for not having the right vocabulary, and so the administrator, please correct me, but I feel like when we had conversation about this in public works and admin, one of the things that you discussed was, for instance, with deer management, if deer management carries over into the next year, we can't fund it, it will look like we have enough, and we choose to take money out of the reserve, it will look as though we went over budget for that year. So what I'm trying to say is spending the $1 million this year, I understand we need to try to use that money in whatever way we want, but there are smart ways I think where we can use this money and sets it up for us to not have an unbalanced budget. And a rebate isn't one of them all. Things like the internet, and my hesitation on the internet is we don't know what that's going to run yet, right? This council voted a year and a half or so ago to use $3 million in reserve, and we thought we had to meet the ARPA halfway to fund the city. We haven't even touched that. We didn't have to touch that because the federal government gave us $7 million. We did it on that. So that 3, well, we didn't have to touch it. That's good. We already said we were willing to go that far. And to me, we should be willing to go that far to finish that job if we need. But we have a bill, at least one that I know of with deer management, that we know what that bill is for the next 5 years. We pay that bill right now. We don't have to worry about how it impacts our budget for the next 5 years and where we find that. And we got a lot of good, we have a lot of good places that we can spend this. I'm confused, I guess, as to what's the best way to make sure that we don't end up in this situation where it's unbalanced budget.
Good.
Yeah, so in this case, we would want to, for whatever purpose the council decides, we would want to encumber the funding. So it would be this year, since, and to kind of go a little backwards here to explain, we've been receiving these payments for quite a while now. I think it's like 10 years, and they've been held in a liability account, and they have not been able to be counted as profit or revenue because in this case, they were held in liability. If it was overturned, we would no longer have that money. So this year, when that final lawsuit was completely closed, that was when we were able to count it as revenue. So what we would need to do here is by ordinance, encumber those funds towards a specific project. It doesn't, it can be
refund to the resident.
Or refund to the resident. So it would be anything that you want to put it towards, but we would need to either spend it this year or we can encumber it moving into January.
And one thing I would just say, not to pick on deer management, but it is a new program. We have no metrics as to how to gauge the success of that. We're going to have a discussion, hopefully momentarily, about a committee to look at those metrics. And again, it's not just for deer management, but that is an expensive new project. And the more I peel that onion, the more concerned I get as to how we're going to be able to gauge the success of that. And so that's just my view on that. Councilmember Edens.
Yes, and you'll probably see me switch devices, so you might have to let me back in as panelist because this battery is going to go on this one. And I just learned there's, for some reason, no way to take these out and hear you guys on the app. Anyway, boo technology. All right. Look, this is what it feels like, right? It feels like we have a bunch of people in the car. We're going through the drive-through and we're giving all of our family members ice cream cones because it's a nice thing to do, but we haven't paid the electric bill yet. It does not feel like we have taken care of enough business for me in good consciousness to have a symbolic gesture right now. And I have sat here and I've added up the costs of some of the projects, you know, $1 million here, 5 to 10 million here. The money for the housekeeping items that have been kicked down the road is substantial for the projects that we have already decided are important to our city and important to our residents. And like I said, you can always come back and do a rebate, but look at it like this too. That $1 million is not from our taxpayer funds. So it is not going to negatively count towards that cap before, as Councilmember Marshall rightly brought up, we would be capped and have to seek voter approval. So it's going to be easier to use this money towards a bigger project that's higher ticket than it is going to be just giving away something out of reserves in the future. Because again, you have more wiggle room with the way the revenue is coming in from the spectrum settlement going towards a bigger project than spending, you know, a 4 million. And as a reminder, it costs money to the taxpayers to put those ballot initiatives on as well. So we're paying for it kind of twice. So keep that in mind. But again, gestures are nice, but I don't have residents calling and asking me to save them money that would essentially be the cost of drive-through a month. They're asking me, why don't you fix the road? Stop telling me you don't have enough money for erosion. Fix my internet. Gosh darn it, I want to be in this century. And they're saying, do something about the deer. That's what I hear about. And I have added up some of these numbers, and the money that we have, that extra 16 million to play with, it's going to go way quicker than you think. And if we have another pandemic or something like that, where we don't have the expected revenue that we have, that we think we have coming in, we're going to be operating at more of a loss. So this just doesn't feel fiscally conservative to me. So if I lose connection, I apologize, but I'm going to try to switch devices. Thank you.
If I could, if you bear with me, Councilmember Rose, City Administrator Lee. So we just finished an exhaustive 5-year strategic plan that includes funding based on income projections during that. It also includes our efforts, which we've been, I think, by all accounts, very successful through the years at getting matching funds and so forth. So my question to you is there anything in our 5-year strategic plan, whether it's watershed or internet or anything else, that we have not indicated a source for the funding for the next 5 years that includes the matching funds?
We have indicated a source of the funding. I will say that there is some projects like watershed erosion and internet that we don't have exact price tags on, that we don't necessarily know if we'll be able to cover the entirety of it. But right now we do have at least some sourcing of each of the projects.
Okay. And my recollection is watershed being number 2 of those.
Watershed is definitely top of the list. Next year is really more for the engineering and planning of it, getting permits for it. But we are prepared for watershed erosion, at least 3 projects for next year.
Thank you. Okay. Councilmember Rose, thanks for your patience.
I guess, you know, my main concern with this is I've heard that we have significant excess. We have excess. We have zero analysis that supports that. None. I've looked at the budget.
Suggests what? I'm sorry, Larry.
I'm saying we don't have any analysis that suggests we have significant excess of funds. We don't. I mean, I think it'd be great to have one. Now, if we all want to, you know, have a gut call, I mean, do we have extra money? Yeah, we do. But let me ask this question. Raise your hand if you would be comfortable with your personal savings at 3 months of your expenditures. I mean, I would not be comfortable. We're an affluent community. We're probably going to manage ourselves accordingly. This is very informative, and it's, in some respects, a lot of municipalities are pretty thin out there. But I'd be a lot more nervous if we truly only had $3 million available. But so I think that's low. I don't think we have a real solid funding plan for our needs. And for example, I know there's been a $30 million number thrown around for erosion. Bottom line is we're never going to do that. but what are we going to do? And how is that going to be funded? If we don't have a number, sometimes we budget it, sometimes we don't budget it. I think we have a good budgeting process. But you know, the other thing that I'm not positive on it, but I would say if we cut our city into the first half of its life and the second half of its life, I think we're going to find we got all the money in the first half of our life. So what's changed and what's the direction and where are we going to be 25 years from now? Because our overhead's going up. It's not going down. You know, what the parks that we put in place, the roads, the bridges, it's all going up. I would like to have an analysis that says that, you know, yeah, we do have internet. It's going to happen. Erosion, we're not going to get to everything, but this is what's planned. And this is what funded. And out of the 18 million, it looks like maybe we would get into 7 or 8 million of it for these various projects, but there's always funding opportunities that come along. And like ARPA, that was a big deal. We didn't have to take the 3 million out of reserves. So it's not that I oppose the rebate. I oppose the rebate. One is it's not high on the priority list. But I oppose it because in my mind, I don't feel we have a real thorough analysis of what should our reserves be. And this is an industry assessment of it, which was very informative. But I just don't feel we have that. And I think we could have it. And whatever it is, it's always going to be wrong. It's going to change every year. We're going to refine it, add it, correct it. But I think we need to have something that we could grade ourselves against. And we just don't. And that's why I don't support. I understand we got to allocate it someplace. But I guess I just don't support the rebate at this time. So I would support, it seems like we're really drifting from the motion, but I would support it going into internet. I would support it going into erosion. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, very quickly. There seems to be more support up here for just the general approach of using this for a big ticket item than there does specifically for internet. And I understand that the triple meander, I've been reminded, and some other erosion projects haven't been budgeted. We've budgeted 3 trial projects on erosion. So there's lots of things that we should consider paying for before we give away rebates, which is my essential point. But I don't know how to go back and modify the motion to reflect a more general approach to using this for a big ticket item.
You can make an amendment.
There's some other folks that want to.
Well, you have the floor, so do you want to make
how exactly would I say that? I would like to amend the motion to that we come up with an appropriate big ticket item that we can partially or fully fund with this $1.1 million windfall, as opposed to giving it out as a rebate, or maybe just opposition to the rebate. I really don't know how to phrase
I think your motion, if I understand what you're wanting to do, would be to put the $1 million in general funds. Does that sound right?
Well, we're going to talk about deer management in a minute. That's another
with it to be added to general funds, with it to be decided at a later date as to how it gets spent. I think that's what I hear you saying.
That would be appropriate, because then we can talk about it in terms of a chunk of money instead of rebate. I'm just trying to kind of kill the idea of the rebate. So yeah,
well, the rebate isn't on the table. The motion on the table on the floor now is to spend it for internet. That's the motion. So do you want to amend that motion? And you seconded that motion. So do you want to amend that motion, which you can do?
Yes, that's what I would like to do, because even though the motion was to spend it on internet, that's quite specific. There doesn't seem to be a lot of support for it. And that was the reason.
And so is the motion, the wording that I mentioned to you, that the million be placed in general funds with the decision as to expenditure later being made. Is that palatable to you?
If that's reasonable, I'm
Is that workable?
accounting
City
is
Attorney?
all completely beyond this.
I need to make sure that's workable from both.
In that case, if we were to add it to the general fund, on January 1st, that would go to the unassigned fund balance. So when we're looking, and this is just to the balance sheet, when you're looking at the balance sheet after January 1st, it would no longer count as a revenue, if that makes sense. So if we.
So you've heard the
McCutcheon-
discussion. Well, just one second.
Okay.
Please. So you've heard what he wants to do. How would you recommend it be done?
In this case, I would say he would like to encumber the funds towards a big ticket item. It could be maybe encumber the funds towards one of the following: erosion, deer management, internet, village green, whatever you would like to do.
I would
but-
suggest to a large capital expenditure to be determined by the council at a later date.
Yeah.
Encumber the
That's
funds.
Very close to what I was hoping to do. I was, Deb reminded me that I could rescind my second of the motion, but this moves us further towards my ultimate. So
Okay.
yes, that would be the wording.
And is there a second to that motion? Second by Councilmember Farmer. And one thing I just want to say, I think some of this is not, obviously it's prudent management. It's to Councilmember Rose's point, how much is good for a rainy day fund? And as I've expressed publicly I think it's also about the size of what the government that we run here. And not to be flippant about it in any respect, but to the analysis point, I suspect that if we got in a room and decided next year or the year after, 6 months from now or 5 years, whether we have enough to do what we want, I'll give you one guess what that answer would be. And I guess give you one guess what it's always going to be. Okay. That's my point. At some point, okay, so we have a second. Now the discussion is on the amendment. Is there any other? We've had a lot of discussion. I know I've let it kind of meander, but I think this will come together and save time, at least for this meeting. Councilmember Dodwell.
I just want to make sure that after we vote on this, that we put on our to-do list in January to analyze our fund balances, our projects, and our 5-year plan, and update where we're at with things.
Well, that plan is on the agenda every quarter automatically. So that's already going to happen.
Okay, I just want to make sure we get back to it.
Councilor Roddenberry.
Is it possible to propose an amendment to the amendment?
Depends on what the amendment is. And yes,
Okay.
it's possible to amend the amendment.
All right. So what I would like to do is propose an amendment that would still proceed forward with using the approximately $1,010,724 towards the trash rebate that we had originally discussed, starting at the last council meeting. No. It was to use it on energy.
So the motion was been. As much as I would like to personally have that motion be germane to the amendment, I'm afraid it's not germane.
Okay.
So if this motion fails, then you would then procedurally be in a position to make that motion.
All right. Thank you.
City Administrator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did want to just note one item too, is that in order to encumber the funds, so in order to count it against 2023 balance sheet, we do need a specific purpose or contract in place. So an ordinance would have to be approved for a certain, project or projects, but we couldn't just name, something to be named later. It would need to have a specific item listed.
Well, that changes the motion then, because
Yeah.
Then I don't think, hold on, let me think this through. Yeah, I don't think we can do that. I mean, I guess we can. I think a better way of saying, I don't think you want to do that. But given how that would,
Yeah, we've identified at least 3 that, let's say the triple meander as a
Is it on?
It's on. Yeah.
Okay.
The triple meander as proxy for a large erosion project. The deer management, that's $1 million. The internet phase 2, that's a commitment. That's a couple million.
But he's saying it needs to be a specific project
When I say specific, it just means it can't be,
to determine later.
to determine later. It can be something as, big as, for a trash rebate program or for deer management, whatever you want to do, but it just has to say expenses associated with X
So
project.
that's the original motion that I seconded. It didn't seem to have as much support as a more general. So I don't know how to do this.
Okay, so City Attorney Young and City Administrator Lee, I think the council needs direction. You've heard the discussion. Let's start this way. Is there a way procedurally for a motion of the ilk the type that's been suggested by Councilor Rambo to be made? So yes or no? Is it or not?
In order to have it reflected in the 2023 balance sheet, I would say no, just because it needs to have a specific project attached.
So is there any objection to withdrawing that motion? And we'll start back at the canvas.
Start back what?
Afresh.
Like now, we're gonna have a more discussion.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, because I don't see any way to make it.
Exactly. So is there any objection to that motion being withdrawn? That's the first question. Your hand up for that or something else?
Well, I had a question about this conversation, but not about that motion.
Okay, hold it for just a while. Okay. Okay, so without objection, the motion, Councilor Edens, do you object to the amendment? You have your hand up. So do you object to the amendment being withdrawn? That would put your motion back in play. I assume you don't.
No, I was only going to speak on the amendment.
Okay. All right. So now we're back to a potential amendment, and we need direction from the city attorney and the city administrator. Hearing the discussion, what would you recommend the motion be?
In this case, city attorney can clarify, but I would specifically say we would want to encumber the settlement monies for insert the project or rebate we would like to do and prepare.
Can it be more than one project, or does it need to
it could be more than one project, but it would have to be specifically stated. So it would have to say internet phase 2 and this, but it would be expenses associated with whatever project you would like to name.
So Councilman Rambo, are you prepared to list your project that you want to make an motion, or do you not want to make an amendment?
Sure, but is there a way to do an end run around that requirement by simply voting yes or no on whether we're going to do a rebate or a large project? I mean, it's kind of an either or question.
We can get at it either way. We can have your amendment, or we can vote on the motion that's on the table. And if it fails, then we'll go back to another motion and see where we go. So which do you want to do? We've got to move.
So I will, we'll revert to the original.
Okay. So the motion on the floor is internet. Councilmember Hopper, thank you for your patience. What's your question?
So I get it somewhat ties back to the amendment, but now we've become so muddied in the waters. I don't even know anymore what we're talking about. So, but
the motion on the floor is to spend $1 million+ on internet.
But my main question is, I guess, to the concern a little bit to Councilmember Rambo's of, we don't seem to have a consistent direction where we want this money to go. So in somewhat of the spirit of his amendment, I understand we're not talking about that anymore, but just kind of getting back to that, like, isn't that coming full circle? And basically, if we were to say, like, we want this to be earmarked for something generally, isn't that essentially what would automatically happen in January anyway?
City Administrator Lee.
It wouldn't be gone. It would this is simply reflecting the balance sheet. So when we're looking at the revenues versus expenditures, right now our revenues have a nice little surplus because of this windfall. If we went to January 1st, that entirety of the settlement would then be considered. It's really procedural, but all of that would then be recorded as just unassigned fund balance. It already was there, and it would no longer count as a revenue. So we would be working just from the revenue sources that we have identified for 2024.
And what would the implication of that be?
Does that?
Yeah, so it would be whatever project or rebate we would want to do with this money. It would then count. We could see, if we wanted to spend the entirety of it, we would see a deficit of about $1,010,000 on the balance sheet.
So it looks, So basically, we're just all talking about paper and like what it's going to like, oh, we have to describe that. Like, so if we went in a deficit, we just have to explain this is why we're in a deficit, right? Like
In this case, yes.
it just seems like we're talking a lot around of things of,
Well,
we're not going to come to a
there are
consensus
many-
of it.
there are
So
many
we're
tentacles to
trying
this.
to
Yeah, there are
wedge
many
something in
tentacles
that
to
just
this,
doesn't make
but
sense.
Lots of elected officials would prefer not to have a deficit budget. Myself. Okay, so we have a motion.
Wanted to add one other item. It does kind of make it more narrowly defined of what it could be spent for, but the city council could decide to transfer this into the capital improvement sales tax fund or a capital improvement fund. And then that would be taking it out of the general operating budget. That is one idea, just so it isn't hurting our operating line at the end of the day. So I just wanted to throw that out there as we're discussing.
Okay, so the motion on the Councilor Clark. So Councilor Edens, I see your hand. I'm gonna have to, I'm sorry, you've spoken twice, and so I'm gonna have to keep we've got a lot of discussion, and so we have a 2 times rule, so I'm gonna have to go on to somebody else. Councilmember Clark.
So if this is decided on, if we vote on it going to one thing or another, one project or certain projects, then if we get grants or something we're looking for, then what happens to that money?
In that case, if we were to encumber it, let's just say towards the internet project, I would have to consult with the city attorney here, but I believe that another ordinance could be made to transfer that money to utilize it in a different purpose. So whatever would be left over, just because if you still have it after the project is completed, that you would not be able to spend it, if that makes sense. So it would just need to be reapportioned. Is that correct, city attorney?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to spend it on internet. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Clark,
No.
Councilmember Nian.
No.
Councilmember Farmer.
No.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
No.
Councilmember Rambo.
No.
Councilmember Flasher,
No.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Onberg,
No.
Councilmember Dodwell,
No.
Councilmember Marshall,
No.
Councilmember Jaxi, Councilmember Hopper,
No.
Councilmember Galani.
No.
Okay, so the motion fails. Is there another motion? Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes, I would make the motion that the $1 million be allocated for a trash rebate program that has already been outlined to us to provide our residents with immediate relief from the unexpected increases that they experienced in their trash bills.
Would you agree to word that being paid over a period of 1 year?
Over a period of 1 year, yes.
Would you also agree to adding with a request to the city administrator to obtain additional what would you call it? Additional favorable terms contractually from the haulers and report back to the council?
Yes, and maybe Mr. Lee would want to outline specifically what it was that he was going to be pursuing.
We're happy to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what would happen here? The department didn't want to shake the tree before getting council's direction. So if we were to move forward with this motion tonight to prepare legislation to approve the program, the department would approach both haulers with the idea of paying for residents' trash bill, a percentage of it as outlined in the memorandum. And at that point, what we would ask from them, since they are getting guaranteed money from us and not having to worry about collections or worrying about multiple processes, process payments, things along those lines, mailers to get their payments. In this case, we would hope that our dollars, so $1 would stretch for potentially $1.50. So really what we'd be able to hopefully do is apply more money than we're actually showing in the charts provided. It would be potentially getting a little bit more bang for your buck, if you will. And then the other item that could potentially occur is that we could approach the haulers and ask them, could we potentially have, since you're getting this windfall of money, instead of, stretching it a little bit further, could we potentially have a freeze on the increase that is scheduled to occur for one of the years? Something to, we're dangling the carrot here, something to get the city something for doing this, pretty much.
So my motion would be to proceed with the trash rebate program while at the same time authorizing the city administrator to pursue those items that he just mentioned.
Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by Councilmember Flasher. Councilmember Edens on the motion.
Yeah, I just think this is incredibly fiscally irresponsible. I am absolutely disgusted. It's nothing personal, but look, the money should be used for projects and the commitments that we've made. There are folks in this room who I've supported on their wards when my ward was left behind. I didn't see that tonight. I saw an about face, and that tells me there's not a commitment to spend money out of reserves. The votes weren't here tonight. They're not going to be here for those extra projects that we need, for those public safety improvements, for watershed. And they're certainly not here for internet. So I can't say, yeah, let's give this money away, understanding that my colleagues are going to be there to help make sure my residents have internet and spend out of reserves. That assurance is out the window tonight. I cannot support this.
Any other discussion on the motion? Councilor Rottenberg.
Yeah, so I think we can assure Councilmember Edens regarding future funding for internet that your councilmember counterparts will be there. I have residents in Ward 3 that also are looking to get high-speed internet service expanded to them. They live in dark areas. And just because we might proceed with this trash rebate program tonight, that does not mean that this council can't authorize funding out of the reserve fund at a later date, when in fact it would be time to begin phase 2 of the internet expansion.
Councilmember Galani.
Yeah, I support this motion for the rebate. And to Councilmember Ottenberg's point, I also agree on that front that, by moving forward with this tonight, we're not closing the door on any future funding opportunities for other projects, be it internet, watershed, or anything else that any ward or council member or residents find important for the city to look into. And we've discussed this already tonight, to where we don't even have numbers on most of these projects. So to sit here and talk about funding projects that we don't even have adequate or accurate funding numbers for, it would be more irresponsible, in my opinion, to discuss funding those projects. And so this gives money that the citizens, technically, it's their money, and it's giving it back to them, and everybody benefits from it immediately. And the other thing is, aside from the fact that we don't have accurate estimated numbers on what these projects are going to be, we also don't know what particular federal funding initiatives are going to be in place that can be utilized to go towards any of these or all of these projects in the future. So I think this council has shown a genuine desire to look into these big projects, and our strategic plan, to the mayor's point, that we spent a lot of time and energy putting that in place. And so I think we're all committed to being responsible and moving forward and accomplishing those goals. This particular initiative tonight is just a small gesture to give back to our residents money that is technically theirs. So at a time when I think they could really use it. So thanks.
Thank you. Councilor McCutcheon.
Yeah, city administrator, please help me understand. Did I hear you say that by utilizing this $1 million+ fund that we have and use it for rebates for the waste hauler program, that you're extending that as a carrot to get a better rate for next year? Is that correct?
Sorry for the miscommunication there. What we are hoping to do is, by guaranteeing a certain percentage of the fees they would collect from our residents, we would be able to either get we would be able to make $1 turn into $1.50 applying that credit. We would hope that could be done, or we could have a freeze on them increasing the fee year over year. So this is something that would have to be negotiated after approaching the haulers. That being said, there is no guarantee that they will be willing to utilize it for any other purpose other than just applying it to each individual house as allocated in the report attached. But this is something that we would hope, since they will be saving money on collections, they'll be saving money on some processes that are involved in the billing, that they could potentially pass that savings along to the city, since we are kind of stepping up to the plate with something like this.
And how likely do you think that is?
At this time, I have not had those discussions based off the wanting to get input from the council. So I would say I can't speak on that because I don't know if they will or not. Can't be 100% sure.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Clark.
Yeah, I want to make amendment to the motion.
Okay.
And the same as with the internet discussion we had before, we need the written plan. We need to know what's going to happen. We need to have it laid out, how we're going to approach the waste haulers about the $1 into $1.50, and to have that all with the milestones and the targets and the purpose of this whole thing, to have it written, a written plan before it happens. That's my amendment.
At the December meeting?
Yes.
At the December meeting?
At the December.
So we have a motion to postpone the motion to the December meeting to give the city administrator the ability to present to the council the written plan for the rebate program, including the things he's outlined relative to incentives from the trash haulers.
We would also need some, and I'm not trying to guide amendments, but if we want to make sure that the money is spent this year, if we're worried about that piece, then we'll want to have legislation presented at the same council meeting to attach to that memorandum with how it would be spent.
So with no objection, if this passes, we can find a way procedurally to do that. So that's the motion on the floor. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Dodwell. So now the discussion is only on the amendment, which is to postpone to have the written report and plan, rather, not report, plan submitted to the council in December. Councilmember Marshall.
Yeah, I just want to first clarify it. This money that we're planning on giving back to trash people actually was charter tax money we collected Spectrum over all those years. So it's really not their money we're giving back. We're giving back internet tax money, and now going to give it because of the trash thing. I think the other interesting issue here is the fact that we constantly get ourselves in these binds where we're moving stuff forward so fast to make it look right bookkeeping instead of really doing our homework to do it right. I mean, again, trying to take the money last month pops up. Oh my goodness, we have to do this. We have to do a rebate. That's just not good government, in my opinion. And I think there's a lot of ways to be able to look at these projects. And if it is that we put the $1 million, which we don't have all of it yet, that 800,000, put that on the books as recovered taxes. Yes, the balance is going to be higher, but then we have the appropriate time to get the programs together and not try to rush it through on 1 or 2 readings to do something that maybe that's not the best use of it. So I just wanted to state that it's not trash money, because we kept telling everybody we weren't involved in any of the trash negotiations. It was truly between them and the customers. Now we're trying to say, well, we're going to negotiate your next price. We don't have any proof of that. Sure, to be a great way to do it, but I just don't think you can do that and turn it around that quickly. So it's not trash money we're giving back. It's tax revenue from Spectrum Charter back then.
Councilor Rottenberg.
So a question I have regarding Councilmember Clark's proposed amendment, and this question goes to Mr. Lee. Can you put together the information that Councilmember Clark is requesting by the December meeting?
If this motion were to proceed, the department would reach out immediately tomorrow to both haulers to schedule meetings. We would ask that we would present them with the item that's before us tonight, and then we would see what they said. We would try to push as much as we could. We would then we would come back at the council meeting during the work session and provide a summary of what is provided by them. And then during the general session, we would go ahead and have legislation that would approve it.
I'm sure he can get it accomplished.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Councilmember Hopper. Councilmember Brooks.
Yeah, I think, Ed, you mentioned it, but I mean, I know it was mentioned as our residents' money. And I guess what I'd like to do is if maybe the city attorney could clarify, I don't really think it's the residents' money, but because the question would be, the court if it was a resident's money, wouldn't the court send it to the residents and not the city?
It all depends on how you want to define it. Ultimately, it was unpaid tax funds that are now paid.
Okay, but that didn't answer my question. Why did the court send it to the city?
Because charter did not pay its taxes to the city.
Okay, so that was money that should have been paid to the city.
By charter to the city, yes.
Okay, so it's not a resident that wasn't overcharged and they're not due a refund.
Correct.
Okay, so again, it still comes down to is what we're doing here tonight is deciding on how to spend $1 million.
Well, the other thing too, not to parse it too much, but we don't know whether Charter had a line item on the bill that said this is the tax we're not going to pay or not. But we do know that our residents paid Charter an amount, and presumably on the expectation they were going to be doing everything legal, and apparently that money didn't make its way to the coffers. But
So they can sue the court then.
yeah. Okay, so we have the motion on the floor to postpone to the next meeting for the Councilmember Ottenberg. I think you had.
Just one on the amendment so far.
Okay, then my apology. You have only spoken once. Go ahead.
All right, so to Councilmember Brost's point, the money was awarded to the city as a result of the settlement of this class action suit. But I guess my question is, well, what constitutes the city? To me, it's constituted by about 35,000 residents within the city. And so as a result, to me, the money belongs to them. Unless somebody wants to redefine what a city consists of.
Okay, so we've had lots of discussion. The motion on the floor is to postpone, and we need to, we're gonna move forward after this into our next meeting. So regardless of how it goes. All right, motion on the floor is to postpone to the next meeting so that we can have a plan presented by the city administrator relative to the rebate program. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Nian. No. Councilmember Farmer.
No.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
No.
Councilmember Rambo.
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher.
No.
Councilmember Brost.
Yes.
Councilmember Edens.
Yes.
Was that a yes?
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
No.
Councilmember Dodwell.
No.
Councilmember Marshall. Councilmember Jaxie. Councilmember Hopper.
Yes.
Councilmember Galani. Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
I think it fails 8-6. Okay, so the motion fails. We're now back to the main motion, which was to proceed with the rebate program with the city administrator negotiating in the two respects he indicated with the trash haulers. We've had a lot of discussion. So that's the motion on the floor, is the rebate program made by Councilmember Ottenberg. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Farmer. Councilmember McCutcheon.
No.
Councilmember Rambo. No. Councilmember Flasher.
Yes.
Councilmember Brost.
No.
Councilmember Edens.
No.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall. Councilmember Jaxie. Councilmember Hopper.
Yes.
Councilmember Galani. Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Nian.
Okay, so that motion fails 8-6. We have been encumbering on people in the audience and those who may be watching for our next meeting, so we need to move to that. So if there's no objection, we're going to take a brief couple of minute break, and then I'd like to, with consensus, we'll have a recess of the work session until after the main meeting. Any objection to that? All right. So let's take a couple of minutes and we'll reconvene, and then we will start the main meeting of the council. Thank you. Order the meeting for the city council for the city of Wildwood for Monday, November 13, 2023. Ms. Eldridge, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bowen,
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni. Councilmember Nian. Councilmember Farmer.
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Here.
Councilmember Rainbow. Councilmember Flasher.
Here.
Councilmember Garitano. Councilmember Rose.
Here.
Councilmember Edens.
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Here.
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
Councilmember Jaxi.
Here.
Councilmember Hopper.
Here.
Councilmember Galani.
Okay, for those of you who are comfortably able, would you please stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, that takes us to public participation. The minutes are on the consent agenda, which we'll do later. Before we begin, I just want to mention a couple of things about our public participation. It is a very valuable component of our meeting. Anyone who wishes to speak must indicate they would like to do that by completing a card and handing it to our city clerk, who is to your left of the podium, or using the raise hand feature on Zoom. When your name is called, please state your name and ward. If you live outside the city, please state your address. To ensure that all those who wish to speak have the opportunity to do so, there is a 5-minute time limitation, and I will let you know when that time limit is reached. If you have any questions for us, please mention that during your remarks and identify the official you would like to respond. That official will make note of it, and at the conclusion of public participation, any official who chooses to respond will have 3 minutes to do so as to all questions directed to that official. The official may choose to respond to your questions after tonight's meeting, and we may also post any responses on the city council page of our website. Finally, please be respectful to others in making your remarks. This means that interrupting others and using profane and abusive language are prohibited. And I want to thank all of you in advance for following these. First speaker card, please.
The first speaker card is Keith Reynolds.
Good evening. Thank you. Keith Reynolds, Ward 2, Field Forest subdivision. I'm here about high-speed internet. This marks my second address to you folks. I was here in February of 2022 and requested help from the city council about getting us high-speed internet. We are a rural subdivision. We have only AT&T and Ameren for electricity. We're on well and septic, so we're a little bit rural enclave in the middle of everybody there. The Grand Meridian to our east and west northwest, and West Southampton Woods have got high-speed internet. I validated that just last week with Spectrum at 1-888-369-2408. If you want me to, we'll give them on the call here and we'll validate again that they are indeed have that high-speed internet. We don't. I spoke and sometime, Mr. Boland, in March, I think you addressed me and called me up and told me that you were going to help take care of getting things going. On December 9th, 2023, I had a meeting with Mr. Boland and then Mr. Lee, your predecessor, Mr. Cross, along with Lauren Edens. Hi, Lauren. Hi, Lauren. And Don Bartoni next door. And we spent an hour talking about my problems, my neighbor's problems. A number of us are here, my compatriots in the subdivision. Again, we were going to be in phase 2. It's now November 2023, and that'll be a year ago. Nothing's happened. I have studied map 1, map 2, map 3, all the way up map 16 of the internet project. I can't find my little subdivision on there. It appears from my just observation of what's gone on here tonight that I don't know where the internet project's going to be. I don't know when I'm going to get it. My compatriots in the subdivision have got children who are going to school. They need it bad. Let's see. What do I need to do to get on it? Mr. Lee, your predecessor, I asked him on the December 9th meeting, what's the name of the VPs at Spectrum that he meets with on a weekly basis? I'd like to have a little conversation with them and get us moved up. Can we do that?
So, Mr. Reynolds, this is a time for your public comment. We don't,
Okay.
we're not
All
able
right.
to do that.
We need high-speed internet in our subdivision. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Don. He's not here, but thank you very much for helping us. Can the council please help us get internet? Rhetorical question. I'll send you all an email asking you then in a separate forum. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Scott Reichert.
Hey, good evening. My name is Scott Richard. I'm in Ward 2. And I'm here in support of Council Member Eden's requests in the previous session to reserve the Spectrum relief money for the internet continuation, and disappointed that that's couldn't happen tonight. But just from my perspective, I wanted to say I am the Chief Information Officer for Mercy, and just want to give a perspective that it's a bit embarrassing as a Wildwood resident to have to tell potential new hires when they come to Wildwood or come to St. Louis, where should I live? Where do you live? I live in Wildwood. Anything I should know about it? It's a beautiful place, and my butt's never going to say, but the trash service is too expensive. I'm going to say, but you might not get internet, which is a really big deal. So I just want to encourage everyone to keep the pressure on. Whenever there's any kind of any indication of any lack of acceleration about this, it's just very frustrating. So, like my neighbors, I was here last in 2022 to comment on this. I have to say I was frustrated with the dealing with Spectrum myself, knowing that this contract was very light on performance requirements. To my perspective, we gave them $7 million in a map and said, go at it, rather than saying, here's how many homes you should be serving with this money, or this is the streets you must serve. So it felt loose to me. So I definitely want to encourage you all in the next round to be tighter with the performance on this contract. But basically, I'll keep my comments brief. I just want to advocate that I'm disappointed that the money coming back from the Spectrum situation was not applied to this. And I encourage you with all haste to proceed with that project. And like my neighbors here in Ward 2, very frustrated. It's an embarrassing situation for the city. I just want to encourage you to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Francis Babb.
Hello again. I'm becoming a regular feature at your city hall. I'm here to talk about, first of all, Francis Babb, 2001, Kerrsdale Court, Clarkson Valley, Missouri. I think that with a few very, very minor changes to the solar ordinance that you have proposed tonight, which you'll more than likely be voting on, you could make this a very reasonable ordinance, and you can do so and pass it tonight and give everybody the rebate that they've been so looking for. Without these minor changes I'm suggesting, I think you're going to upset the apple cart all over again, fortunately. If I were to take, when we built our system back over a decade ago, we had 100 solar panels, and we have what I would call a kick-butt solar energy system. And I would liken that solar energy system to be what I would call a Lamborghini, a really nice system. But if I had to apply every single aspect of your solar energy ordinance to my house and start ripping off panels in order to be compliant with it, I wouldn't be owning a Lamborghini. I'd be owning one of these. How many panels would I lose in order to comply with your ordinance? Out of my 100, I would lose, if I've counted correctly, 95. 95. So, and what's sad about it is my roof is not all that complicated. I don't have a lot of gables. I don't have a lot of bathrooms, plumbing fixtures, chimneys, this kind of thing. What would happen if I had a really complicated roof? Not everybody's going to lose 95% of their system for sure. But I would say on average, people are going to lose 20 to 25% of their system based upon the ordinances that you have in the books. So these are my specific recommendations that I pray that you do in your vote tonight. Number one, I recommend that you issue variances to people who want to build a very attractive ground mount systems and people whose systems would be greatly diminished, like mine, because of the overly restrictive ordinance that you have. And then second of all, I would say you need to go back to the version of this ordinance that was before Friday that allowed panels on accessory structures. That part was removed on Friday. You have no ground mounts that are allowed, no canopies, no carports, no awnings, no electric charging stations. And there are some really beautiful things that are on accessory structures like barns and that kind of thing. You're going to be issuing a lot of variances for a lot of people. The number one thing, if you had to do just one thing, and make a change about this symmetry issue. Symmetry is not defined at all. And this number one issue is going to cause you the absolute most heartburn of everything. It's going to result in all kinds of people coming before your Board of Adjustments. And it's going to limit solar on the homes that face the right direction. I can see it if you wanted to restrict solar to people that would be front facing or street facing, but to do it on all four sides of the house, that's excessive. And when you couple the symmetry issue with the fire code issue, it becomes even more excessive. I would say that Metro West, which I think is your fire department, should have the ultimate say in what your fire codes are. But unless there's a darn good reason to make the fire codes stricter, your fire codes stricter than the real fire codes, I think that you're restricting panels unnecessarily. My recommendation is to simply say Wildwood adopts the fire codes, the national fire codes that are currently in your ordinance, and not something more restrictive than that. What else? I hope that if you indeed elect to vote this ordinance through, that you at least commit to looking at it another time as soon as an election cycle goes through and some of the people that are sitting up here are replaced with people with more open minds that you do. I beg you, please let every resident in your community have a quality, a high energy producing solar energy system, and don't make unnecessary restrictions that have no real benefit for aesthetics. I'm done. My last time.
Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Betsy Vanderhayden.
Good evening, Betsy Vanderhayden, live on Birch Forest in Ward 5. And I'm just going to follow up what Ms. Babb just talked about. The fact that, I mean, we are going in the right direction, believe me, what y'all did during the last month or two in terms of getting a referendum from the residents of the city. And that we are, you know, we completely said, yeah, people that have an orientation toward the front of the house, symmetry, solar panels are great. And that's very reasonable. But again, making symmetry mandatory on every rooftop, every side of the house, which is not visible from the front or from the street side of it, I think is, it's going to really make it very challenging for our residents to be able to get the full benefit of the panels. Requiring the front and street facing to be symmetrical is reasonable, but in some cases, the homeowner will be unable to generate the amount of power that's needed to make a project feasible. In other words, the home would be underpowered, much like having an undersized HVAC system. And that would cause a resident to not be able to get the economic benefits of the solar. So solar projects that were permitted under our current law, they would also allow some of these non-symmetrical designs and arrays. And so now we're going to, like, we open up to the front of the building, but now we're like prohibiting things and being restrictive on the backs of buildings and places that may or may not be able to be seen by the public. So in order to encourage solar projects in our city, solar ordinances must be reasonable and accommodating to our residents and their energy needs. Let's make Wildwood a welcoming, sustainable community by amending the current law, the bill 2829, to allow asymmetrical arrays on those non-front street-facing surfaces. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Robert Mabry.
Evening all. Thanks for an opportunity to speak. I'm here to
And could we get your name and your ward, please?
Certainly. Bob Mabry and Ward 2. Resident for 35 years, nothing but my wife and I and our dog. So we're not power users. I'm here to talk about the internet and support for it to continue on phase 2. When we had visiting our son and our daughter with their families, and the head count went from 2 and a dog to 10 people, we got throttled. We had to apportion the ability to access the internet, and we don't stream, we don't Google or gaggle much. So that really showed us firsthand the impact of not having broached the 21st century for communications at our household. And I think always more, not me, but those young families that got referenced earlier as having children, having more than just 2, and the impact that they're dealt with. This number one priority for the entire city as committed by the council, I feel is experiencing a retrenchment or not a retreat, but and anything we can do to figure out how to change our mind. That's what I feel as a Ward 2 resident. And there's other wards in phase 2 outside of just mine. As mentioned earlier, our entire subdivision of 18 households in 40 acres is bordered entirely on the west by a development that has high-speed internet, along the north by Etherton Valley, across Bottom Creek, and then along the entire northeast side and east side by Wild Horse, that also shares high-speed internet. I couldn't agree with you more, really more than you have mentioned. Not just agree with you, but actually would prefer to see that accountability by plans and specs and a performance specification and a schedule. That has nothing to do in the world with the fact that the money should be committed the most logical way that it can be, and that is by this windfall $1,010,000. It's a committed, it's a project, it's contracted. I don't mind waiting until it can be executed intelligently, as it has not been to date. That's no reason to find machinations that that provide for a rebate for something that the citizens don't need and shouldn't want in the first place. $750 a month for a mere year for trash, and trash isn't anybody's first item of complaint about the city. It can be the roads, it can be other things, but it isn't a trash rebate of a pittance. It's that's a contrivance. I'd like to see the funds intelligently committed now, because they can be, and then hold the project. You don't, sorry. It's not mandatory that we progress with Spectrum immediately. I certainly don't want to, because they're doing things terribly now, and they need to be displayed a commitment by the city that just as much as it's going to get the high-speed internet service improvements to all of its residents, not just those east of 109, but to all of them, and as expediently as possible. It's only going to be possible when Spectrum sees that they're going to be doing it the city's way this time, not their way. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
The rest of the speaker cards I have are for the public hearing items.
Okay. One on Zoom, I don't think. There is one. Okay.
Hello. Hello.
Okay, Mr. Vanek, did you hear the things I mentioned about public participation earlier?
Absolutely. Yes, I did.
Okay, you're on. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you very much. James Vanek. Obviously, most of you know me, my group.
Could you state your ward, please?
Oh, yes, thank you. Ward 7. And Citizens for a Safer Old State. And first of all, I want to say that, I have compassion for those people who don't have internet and their trash rates are going up, and their solar panels, they have issues with their solar panels. But here in our ward, we have a serious safety issue that's being mostly ignored by the city council and by the county. And we send dozens and dozens of our most inexperienced drivers, high school kids, from Lake Chesterfield down what I would consider the most dangerous road in the county. And if you can point out a more dangerous road, I'd be happy to consider that. But it is steep, it's heavily traveled, it has sharp corners, has no shoulders, it has no guardrails, and has sharp drop-offs. And nobody seems too concerned about that issue. And we spend, and this is a question to all city council members, and maybe perhaps Lauren Edens particularly. Why do we spend $1.5 million without much question and unanimously for J turns on West MO 100. But when it comes to Old State, there's all sorts of scrutiny, and well, you know, I'm not sure if we should do this or not, because you know it's so one-sided. You know, it's like all the money goes to the west side of the town, but when we talk about the safety issues for our area, it's like, well, you know, that's the county road. But nobody said, you know, when you were all voting unanimously for Missouri 100 and the J turns, like, well, that's a state road. And why are we spending money on a state road when the state has a lot of money? The county, on the other hand, does not have much money, as we all know. And it's very frustrating for me. And it's hopefully there's a resolution tonight, and hopefully it'll be passed by unanimous consent. And it doesn't cost the city a penny to do this. This should have been done years ago. And my son and I were actually driving down Old State the other day. It wasn't a semi coming up at us, but it was, you know, it was a Ford I don't know, 350, 250 dually, and it had your typical truck with the it was the typical contractor's trailer behind it. And he was well over the line because he was worried about dragging his trailer into the inner curb coming up on Old State. And I mean, we just had to pray that the guy was not going to hit us. And that's what we deal with on a daily basis on Old State. We just pray that we're not going to get hit by a large truck coming up that road. This resolution by the city is way overdue regarding semis coming up that road. The road is totally inadequate for semi trucks coming up that road. And it should have been done years ago. And I can't understand why nobody's done anything up to now.
Mr. Vanek, your 5 minutes is up.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the time to discuss this.
Thank you. Anyone else online? No new speaker cards. Okay. All right. Thanks to each one of you.
Mayor Boland.
Oh, yes.
May I have a chance to respond since I was
I'm
singled
sorry.
out
Yes,
for
you
being the
can. My
question?
apologies. Sure.
Yeah,
Up to 3 minutes.
thank you so much.
Up,
It
up to
was
3 minutes.
okay.
Up to 3 minutes.
Okay. Yes. Look, just because I've spent a lot of time advocating for my own residents tonight doesn't mean I don't care about the roads in other areas. Ward 2 folks drive roads everywhere too, right? But I also have an obligation to fight for what my residents need. That being said, I don't think any of us are not trying to work out the same type of situation that we've worked out with MoDOT. The example that you gave was the J turns. That's a cost share. That's essentially what we've asked for the county to do, is to go cooperatively into a road improvement project with them. And what they have said is, no, that's not a priority for us. So it's not that we're not trying to spend money like we do with MoDOT. That being said, there was a meeting where I offered what I thought was a creative solution, which is if the county doesn't have the money, but we don't want to set a precedent for shouldering their burdens. It's certainly something that we can't do, but we want to see results. Can we work out something like a Lend-Lease program with them, where they either bond on their own, or if they're not willing to do that, they come to us and they pay us back over time for their portion. But to do that, you have to have money in reserves to essentially lend or spend for another group, which is all the more reason why I believe we shouldn't have supported the rebate. So I'm not sure, you know, if folks from your ward wanted to support spending the money another way, they certainly could. I've offered what I think is a different solution. Nobody took the torch up on that. So, I mean, I support safety improvements to Old State, but if there's not momentum for that, and I hope there is, I would like there to be momentum. That doesn't mean I have an obligation to stop fighting for my residents and their concerns. We can do more than one thing at once, is what I'm saying.
Thank you. Next on the list, under mayor announcements and appointments, we have proclamation. Mr. Cohn, would you mind joining me over here next to the bench, please? All right, so many of you know Mr. Cohn. He is basically, for those of us at City Hall, largely a fixture right here for a number of reasons. And we're going to get to those in just a second. Our Planning and Parks Committee, which is a our Planning and Parks Committee thought that given the history of Mr. Cohn with our city, which you're going to hear about in just a moment, that it would be a nice gesture to do a proclamation for him. And when I heard this idea, I was all in with it. And so I set about getting some information and preparing what I'm now going to read. Whereas Ed Kahn has been a longstanding resident of the city of Wildwood, whereas he has served in multiple roles as part of our community and city, including being the sole patron of the Plein Air Art Fair and serving as a member of the city's planning and zoning. Whereas Mr. Cohn has for many years generously allowed the city and its residents to utilize his real property in town center for various community events without cost. Whereas he donated real estate to the city of Wildwood to use for the current location of this municipal building. Whereas Mr. Cohn has made numerous financial commitments that have promoted the success of the city's town center. And whereas his service personifies the type of leadership and citizenship the city of Wildwood is proud to recognize. Now, therefore, I, James R. Boland, mayor of the city of Wildwood, on behalf of the city of Wildwood, do on this 13th day of November, 2023, thank Mr. Cohn for his selfless service to our city and its residents. And one more. Do further hereby proclaim November 13, 2023, and each November 13th hereafter to be Ed Kahn Day in the city of Wildwood. All right, that takes us to public hearings. The first is our proposed 2023 budget. Would you please read it, Ms. Eldridge?
Proposed 2024 municipal budget.
Okay. City Administrator Lee, do you have anything you'd like to say about our budget?
Yes.
Proposed.
Thank you, Mayor. So generally, we are seeing nominal gain increases across the board. For 2024, planned expenditures total about 27 million and are fully funded by a combination of revenues anticipated along with the portions of money that we've put away. For the money expected to be received in 2024. Sorry, 1 second here. We're expected to have a $33 million. Sorry, 1 second. So for the general fund, we do plan on having our operating revenues at 12,400,000 and our expenditures on the operating side at 12,369,000. That leaves a $40,000 nice little buffer there for us on the operating side. In this case as well, will leave us at the end of the year of 2024 with an unreserved general fund balance of $15,403,000. Top of that, I just wanted to go over, and I'm more than happy, the department's more than happy to answer any questions, but did want to go over some general goals that we have coming up in 2024. In 2024, we hope to fill the Communications Economic Development Manager role along with the Arborist Vegetation Specialist role. This year, we didn't have those roles filled, so that did affect the overall outcome of the 2023 budget. We do plan to update the IT infrastructure within the Wildwood Municipal Building to add additional wireless access points along with replacing the current network switches that we have in the server room to make a more foreseeable and cyber-proof computer system here at City Hall. We also want to look at the oversee the completion of phase 1 of the internet project, along with starting phase 2 of the internet project. We will be implementing the city's new fee schedule, along with getting those different, that should result in additional revenue for the city. And the other piece here is we plan on starting the work on the Village Green. And on top of that, we also have a couple of public works projects we're planning on doing here at 109 and BA South. We have the Center Avenue Improvement Project that we have plans, bids, and we're considering in construction on, and the Manchester Road and Taylor Road resurfacing project. At this point, we have a couple more projects we have with our Watershed Erosion Task Force. We are planning to work on the detention and retention basins at Cox Creek, along with completing some restoration projects at Evergreen Forest Court and the Highlands at Wildwood subdivision area. Overall, we have quite a few different items that we're planning on achieving in 2024, and the money currently proposed should fund it. The last piece, though, is under the capital improvement sales tax fund. We do have a couple more projects than we usually do, than we got to this year. So that is why we are a little bit tipped on that side for the capital improvement fund specifically. The department's available for any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Are there any questions for our city administrator or comments? All right. And I want to thank each of you, council members, for assisting in your part in getting us to this point with the proposed budget, as well as our city team members at City Hall and our city administrator. Do we have any speaker cards? Okay. All right, we'll go on to the next item then, for public hearing, PZ Meadows of Cherry Hills, PZ 12- regarding PZ 12-13. Ms. Eldridge, would you please read it?
A response to a request from the Manors at the Meadows of Cherry Hills Homeowners Association regarding PZ 12-13, Manors at the Meadows of Cherry Hills, care of McBride & Son Homes Incorporated, R4 7,500 square foot residence district with a planned residential development overlay district, PRD, south side of Manchester Road at its intersection with Cherry Hills Meadows Drive, which seeks a modification to the existing site-specific governing ordinance, thereby eliminating the description that is set forth therein regarding the associated service lanes, alleys, as private in nature.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett, do you have anything you want to mention relative to this hearing item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and I will be brief. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Planning and Zoning Commission has provided to you a recommendation report relative to this issue that was read into the record. The item relates to the private nature of alleys, and the wording in the site-specific ordinance requires them to be private in nature. Based upon the action of the Town Center Update Team, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and ultimately City Council, there is an opportunity now for alleys to become publicly maintained. To accommodate this request from the Homeowners Association, the ordinance needs to be amended. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended that that ordinance amendment proceed forward favorably. And so the information before you tonight eliminates the word private, so as the consideration of public maintenance of these alleys can proceed forward. If there are any questions after public comment, the department will be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes. Teresa Pearson.
Good evening. My name's Teresa Pearson, and I live in Ward 8. I am one of the trustees of the Manors at the Meadows at Cherry Hills. I am representing each and every one of our 38 homeowners, asking for your support in changing or amending the existing ordinance to delete the description of the alleys as private, to allow them to be transferred to the city for future maintenance. This maintaining of our alleys by our subdivision is costing our subdivision 36% of our budget. We are burdened with this expense. Most of the expense is because we have to hire a private contractor to come out and plow these two small alleys, which total less than 800 feet in length. So again, we are asking for your support in this. I'm also asking at this time that we could maybe do a second reading of this tonight to help expedite this process for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other speaker cards? All right. That takes us to the third and final item for public hearing. Mr. Vinich, Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation regarding PZ 20 and 21-22.
A recommendation report of the Planning and Zoning Commission regarding its consideration and recommendation relative to PZ 20 and 21-22, Greenberg Development Company LLC, Wildwood GBK LLC, P.O. Box 486, Wildwood, Missouri 63038, second amended C8 Planned Commercial District, amended C8 Planned Commercial District, and C8 Planned Commercial District with a conditional use permit, CUP, southwest corner of Taylor Road and Main Street, street addresses 16700, 16720, 16727, 16780, and 16795 Main Street, St. Louis County locator numbers 23V310561, 23V310570, 23V310581, 24V630303, and 24V630312, which would allow for greater latitude in building design and placement considerations relative to both residential components of this major mixed-use development, reflecting the planned developers of them now addressing their respective approaches upon the site.
Thank you, Ms. Elvers. Mr. Vinich.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, as in the last discussion, the Planning and Zoning Commission has provided for your consideration a recommendation report regarding this particular matter as read into the record. As the City Council is aware, this particular project entails approximately 11 acres at the corner of Main Street and Taylor Road. The intent is to develop it with a major mixed-use project that's inclusive of multiple family residences, commercial businesses, and detached single-family dwellings on individual lots. When this particular project was submitted to the City Council, there was not a specific developers involved. That has changed, and with the incorporation of developers that intend to now construct the project, they have made modifications to the design and the preliminary development plan to accommodate those changes, which the Planning and Zoning Commission felt were significant improvements. The ordinance, as recently passed, needed to be amended. Tonight, you have a favorable recommendation regarding those requested amendments, which would allow this project to proceed forward to the next step. If there are any questions after public comment, the department would be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. First speaker card, please.
The first speaker card is Ed Cohn.
Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Ed Cohn, Ward 3. I'm the managing member of Wildwood GBK LLC. As Mr. Vinich has reported to you, we have found that there was room for improvement in the original ordinance. And we're at a point now that in order to proceed, which a next step would be site plan approval, to really feel comfortable moving forward, we need to have the amended ordinance approved. And now that I find that it's Ed Cohn Day, I respectfully request that we have 2 readings of the ordinance tonight so that we can move on and keep this project moving forward with the utmost speed. I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
The next speaker card is Joel Oliver.
Good evening, Joel Oliver, 4565 McCree. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Green Street Real Estate Ventures. We've been thrilled to have the opportunity to partner with Ed and the Greenbergs to bring this project to Wildwood. We've spent many months now getting to where we are. It's been a great experience with city staff, and we're really happy about how this has evolved. So we're looking forward to continuing working with you all, and I'm here if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you remember the council have any questions or comments? Councilor Dodwell.
This is a question for perhaps Mr. Vunich. When will the groundbreaking begin on this project?
Well, as Mr. Cohen alluded to, we do have the site development plan process still to proceed forward. The good news is with the site development plan, that acts as a preliminary plat, which is the first step in the subdivision process. That also allows the Department of Public Works, in this case, Rick Brown, to do a preliminary grading permit. My guess is they would like to get started sometime in spring or early summer.
And I'd also like to commend the group on the changes that have been made to this. I think that's a much better layout, especially for the homes, the smaller homes along Taylor Road in Old Manchester. It gives them a park-like feel where possible. So good design work. Thank you, gentlemen.
Any other comments or questions?
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. So that closes our public hearings. Council members, if there's no objection, before we get into our legislation, I think, even though I think it's going to go relatively quickly, we do have under miscellaneous two items that arose out of our last meeting. They are the findings of fact and conclusions of law, and they relate to the two solar matters, Downey and Scott. Would there be any objection to moving those to this point in the agenda and addressing those? And my reasoning is the members, these two individuals have been at City Hall many times, and rather than ask them to wait any further through our meeting, if we could just address these now, I think it would be a nice thing to do. Councilmember Marshall. Yeah, if there's no objection, we'll just do it by consensus, but we can do it. Well, you make the motion. That's okay. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Dodwell. Is there any objection to the motion? Right, so motion passes by consensus. So that's what we'll do. So that takes us to miscellaneous findings, fact, and conclusions of law. You've been provided with those by the city attorney. You have anything further you want to add, Mr. Young?
I would simply say that they are reflective of the actions by the council at the last meeting.
Okay. And if a motion is made and seconded and passes to accept the findings of fact and conclusions of law relative to these, is there any objection to doing these in unison, or do you need to do it separately?
I would prefer they be done separately.
Okay, so we'll handle them separately. And if the motion is made that seconded and passes relative to accepting the findings of fact and conclusions of law, that will bring each of these matters to final conclusion. With that, does someone want to make a motion? Councilman Rambo.
Sure, I will move that we.
That would be Thomas J. Downey Jr. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Ottenberg. Is there any discussion on the motion? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Yeah, Councilor Edens, I'm assuming you came in a little late there, but I just want to be clear, you were voting in favor of the motion. Is that correct?
Yes, there's just a little bit of delay on my end, so I had trouble.
Okay, no problem.
So thanks for your patience with me.
No problem. All right, that takes us next to Glenn Scott, 16245 Windcrest Ridge Court, PZ 15-22. Is there a motion? Made by Councilmember Farmer to approve the findings of fact and conclusions of law. Is that correct? Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Galani. Any discussion on the motion? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Sorry. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, and thank you for your patience. All right, now that takes us to legislation. The first bill is 2815. My understanding is from our city team members that the developer has asked that this be postponed, I believe indefinitely, given that the development is not going to occur. Is that correct, Mr. Benich? Thank you. So does someone want to make a motion to postpone indefinitely Bill 2815? Made by Councilmember Galani, seconded by Councilmember Marshall. All in favor of the motion to postpone Bill 2815 indefinitely, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that is done. Bill 2822, I understand from our city team, they've asked that this be postponed to December to allow additional time, I believe, to work with the proposed developer. Is that correct, Mr. Vinich?
Is correct. And we also now have a zoning violation on the particular property that we're trying to address with the property owner as well. So there's two good reasons not to proceed forward.
I see
Thank
that.
you.
Okay. Someone want to make a motion to postpone to the December meeting made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Flasher. All in favor of the motion to postpone Bill 2822 to the December meeting of the City Council, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Bill 2827, which relates to the new composition of our Historic Preservation Commission and affects all wards. And if you'll skip over the next bill and go to Bill 2830, which relates to a maintenance agreement with Metropolitan Sewer District. Those are two of our three remaining second readings, and this one, 2830, affects Ward 8. Would there be any objection to handling Bills 2827 and 2830 collectively? And that will leave Bill 2829. We'll come back to that. Seeing no objection, is there a motion for the second reading of Bills 2827 and 2830? Made by Councilmember Flasher, seconded by Councilmember Nyan. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read the two bills for a second time. I'm sorry, that's my fault. Councilor Edens, I'm assuming you were voting yes. I forgot to wait for the delay. I'll get there. Just give me a couple more times. Yes, that's correct.
Bill number 2827, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending section 440.020 of the Code of Ordinances of the city of Wildwood by deleting it in its entirety, enacting in lieu thereof a new section 440.020, and providing for the composition of the Historic Preservation Commission, second reading. Bill number 2830, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute a maintenance agreement with the Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District, MSD, for stormwater improvements to be constructed and used for the city's village green site, second reading.
Mr. Benich, do you have anything you want to add on either bill?
With regards to the Historic Preservation Commission, I would just like to extend the commission members' thanks for the consideration of this and a favorable action if it occurs tonight. They are very excited about being able to add a youth component to the commission. And Ms. Broyles, our current liaison for Planning and Zoning Commission, is also extremely excited to be able to finally vote. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Right, seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bills 2827 and 2830.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan, Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Bros,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi, Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani.
Okay, the bills are passed and will be in effect once signed. That takes us to Bill 2829. We will need a motion to amend this, and I think there was a small typo the city attorney wants to mention before we entertain a motion to amend, if the council so chooses. City Attorney Young.
Thank you, Mayor. First, the amendment, proposed amendment will be after the second reading per the charter. But I did notice that there were some inadvertent omissions that I had made by inadvertent deletion of language. So I wanted to be clear what the proposed amendment is. And the only proposed amendment from the bill that was first read is an amendment to section 15 of the proposed bill, which adds a new subsection 4 to section 415.630.b and reads as follows. Notwithstanding the provisions of this section to the contrary, any conditional use permit approved for the installation of a solar energy system on or before November 13th, 2023 shall be deemed an approved permit pursuant to this subsection B. Semicolon, provided, however, the conditional use permit approved shall remain subject to section 415.500 subsection O of this code.
Can you just please explain what that does?
per our conversation at the last meeting, this effectively means that any conditional use permit that we've been approving over the last several weeks is not invalidated now by the passage of this ordinance.
Okay, thank you. So is there a motion for the first reading of, and we'll get to the amendment as the city attorney noted, if this is made as a motion and passes for second reading and gets read. Is there a motion for the second reading of Bill 2829 made by Councilmember Ottenberg, seconded by Councilmember Rambo? All in favor of the motion for second reading of the bill, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Ms. Eldridge, please read the bill for a second time.
Bill number 2829, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending provisions in chapter 415 of the Code of Ordinances of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, and enacting a new section 415.630, providing for regulations related to the use of solar energy systems within the city of Wildwood, second reading.
Thank you. Ms. Edens, you have your hand up. What were you gonna make a motion or what were you want to do here?
Just wanted to ask an informational question for my own understanding, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
On symmetry, on how the department is kind of interpreting that. For example, whether or not something is symmetrical across a horizontal plane versus a vertical plane. Does it matter, or am I only looking at panels that can be arranged in a rectangle? Or for example, if it was more of a pyramidal shape, it would be symmetrical this way, just not this way. I saw a great example of this down Manchester Road. There were solar panels on a building, or residence rather, that went 2, 3, and 4. And so you could argue that there's vertical symmetry, but not horizontal symmetry.
Mr. Benich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Edens and members of the City Council, it's important to note that symmetry is a key component of the new regulations. And from the department's perspective, we've looked at the symmetry issue for almost the entirety of the permits that have been reviewed and submitted to the City Council from the standpoint of front facing. We understand that symmetry is important, but on the side and rear of the roof system, we understand that they're not visible or as visible from the street. And so from that perspective, we've, for the most part, limited our review of the symmetry issue to the front facing area of the dwelling. In response to your question, what Mr. Newberry, Ms. Ripito, and I do is we block the panels so that they, for the most part, create squares or rectangles. And on only one instance, I believe, we found one that had like an orphan panel, and it was simple to adjust with cooperation from the property owner and the solar energy company. So I think in application, we're doing the best we can to make reasonable judgments regarding what is generally symmetrical and largely square or rectangle.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Farmer.
Joe, just for some clarification. So you guys are looking at the symmetry on the front of the house, but are we putting in this ordinance that it has to be symmetrical everywhere?
Well, it says in the ordinance, I believe, in a symmetrical fashion. And from that perspective, certainly we'll start with the primary roof component, which is the front. And certainly if there's something that looks just extra out of the ordinary, we'll identify it on the sides or rear of the same roof system. However, we are trying to, as the City Council has, I think, alluded to the Department of Planning and Parks, to make these systems easier to install without necessarily creating problems for the neighbors.
Okay, so I guess my question is, if we put it in the ordinance that it needs to be symmetrical everywhere, doesn't it then need to be symmetrical everywhere?
Yeah, I don't think it says it has to.
It says in a symmetrical fashion. And again, I could show you probably easier than describe, but obviously the panels are rectangle.
Sure.
So what we try to avoid is, let's say the panels are all in a horizontal plane and then there's two that basically stick up. We want to see why they can't be in the same horizontal plane. We create a single box for the two panels and another box for the remaining panels.
Right.
So we're trying our best to do that. Would I say that in some instances that symmetry is going to apply to all four sides of the roof, maybe not, but they'll be in a symmetrical fashion.
I think what I hear you saying is that and I think it's in what I understand, I can speak for all of us, it's sort of the intent from all of us, that your focus is principally and overwhelmingly on the front of the residence, right?
Yes, sir.
And relative to, and I don't know where you're headed with questioning, but I'd be real cautious about limiting it just to the front, because these things can come up in any multiple set of circumstances where there might be, someone that lives right next to the side of the house that has some tree or something. I mean, there could be any number of different issues here. I would recommend we have some flexibility with it. And I don't know if it gives it that much flexibility, but at least I don't know if I'd constrain it any.
Yeah, no, I mean, my thought is more to make sure that there remains a level of flexibility. I don't want to put something in the code that says it has to be, not that we're saying this, but it has to be, 3 by 3 or it doesn't work. That's what I'm concerned about. I'm happy to have all the flexibility in the world. That's what I would like to try to do.
Yeah.
And just a quick review, they have to be flush mounted, no greater than 6 inches off the roof surface. They have to have critter guards to hide the gap. They have to, all the capping, support racks, et cetera, have to be black. As closely matched color of the shingles. We have a reflectivity component, and we have all these safety precautions in relative to the fire district. And from the fire district perspective, we're just basically notifying them of the installation, and they basically say we put it down in the logbook. So if we respond to an emergency there, we know what we're dealing with. So we're not imposing a fire code requirement. At
So
least
we're
as
just
far as-
focused on symmetry, just on symmetry.
You betcha.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. I know you've been sleeping and breathing this for a while, so
I would love to not ever have one of these conversations again. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Are you done with your questioning?
Yes.
Okay. Does someone want to make a motion to amend as indicated by the city attorney relative to making clear that any CUP that's been granted is not negatively affected by this? Councilmember Dodwell, is that your amendment? Seconded by Councilmember Brost. Is there any discussion on the amendment to the bill? See no discussion on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment to the bill, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the amendment passes. So Bill 2829 is before the council for final passage as amended. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2829 as amended.
Councilmember Nyan, Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo, Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Prost,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg,
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi, Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani, Councilmember Clark.
Okay, the bill passes as amended. Will be in effect once signed. That takes us to first readings. Bill 2831 relates to a nominal increase in our police services agreement per the cost sheet that affects all wards. Bill 2832 pertains to a maintenance agreement for our public roads, rights of way, and park maintenance, and that affects all wards. Bill 2833 relates to our municipal budget that we had the hearing on, and that affects all wards, obviously. Bill 2835 is an agreement, pertains to an agreement with DG2 Design for landscaping that affects all wards. Bill 2835 relates to a successor developer agreement and cash deposit agreement as to Tuscany Ridge in Ward 1. Bill 2836 relates to an agreement with Omni Tree Service for all wards, affecting all wards. Bill 2837 is pertaining to an agreement with Civil Design, Inc. Relative to completing the final design of Main Street Road Extension Project for Ward 8. Bill 2838 relates to an agreement with George Butler and Associates to begin the engineering design for the Route 100 J-turn project on Highway 100 that affects wards 1 and 6. And finally, Bill 2839 relates to an agreement with O.R. Cole and Associates relating to the Old State Shared Use Path project, and that affects Ward 7. Would there be any objection to having these bills read in unison for first reading? Councilmember McCutcheon.
Yes, will you please pull out Bill 2837?
we will pull Bill 2837. Is there any other bill that anyone wishes to have pulled? Okay, with that, could I please have a motion for first reading for bills 2831, 2832, 2833, 2834, 2835, 2836, 2837, and 2839. Made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Hopper. All in favor of the motion for the en masse readings, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read the bills.
Bill number 2831, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, approving the 2024 police services cost sheet as an addendum to the police service agreement by and between St. Louis County and the city of Wildwood, first reading. Bill number 2832, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute certain public roads, rights of way, and parks maintenance agreements on behalf of the city with certain contractors for public roads, rights of way, and parks maintenance within the city, first reading. Bill number 2833, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, adopting the municipal budget and capital improvement program for the city of Wildwood for fiscal year 2024, first reading. Bill number 2834, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute a professional services agreement with DG2 Design for the city's updated landscape manual and sustainable planning guide, first reading. Bill number 2835, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute a successor developer agreement and cash deposit agreement with the Tuscany Ridge Homeowners Association for the release of funds from the defaulted escrow account associated with this residential subdivision and reimbursing the association for its completion of street corrections shown on the approved improvement plans, first reading. Bill number 2836, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a city contractor agreement with Omni Tree Service Incorporated for the planting of new trees within the public rights of way of the city of Wildwood, first reading. Bill number 2838, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a city consultant agreement with George Butler Associates Incorporated, DBA GBA, for engineering design of the Route 100 J-turn project in the city, first reading. Bill number 2839, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to execute a city consultant agreement with O.R. Cologne Associates LLC for right-of-way acquisition services for the Old State Road Shared Use Path project within the city, first reading.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brown, do you have anything you want to mention relative to bills 2831, 2832, 2836, 2838, or 2839?
Thank you, Mayor Bowen. I don't have anything in particular. I would defer to the city administrator relative to the first bill relative to the police.
Thank you.
Bill, but otherwise, no.
So
thank
we'll
you.
handle that in a moment. As to all the others, do you have anything you want to mention?
I do not, Mayor. Thank you, though. Just any
Okay.
questions?
Any questions on any of those for Rick or comment? Okay. City Administrator Lee, anything you want to mention relative to bills 2831 or 2833?
Yep. Thank you, Mayor. Just really quickly on Bill 2831, we will be experiencing a 2.4% increase in the cost for our police services. This does not change the number of officers we have. We are not decreasing anything in that regard. We will also have, this just allows us to maintain 5 beats to be able to go circulating throughout the city consistently. So this is just an addendum to the police service agreement that was passed by ordinance in 2021. Department's available for any questions at this time.
Any questions for our city administrator? All right, seeing none, Mr. Vintage, do you have anything you want to mention relative to bills 2835 or 2834 or 2835?
No, sir, but as with Mr. Brown, I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Vintage?
Thank you.
All right. Give me just one moment. Okay, so that takes us to the bill we pulled from the mass reading, which is 2837. Is there a motion for the first reading of bill 2837? We have a Councilmember Farmer, second by Councilmember Galani. All in favor of the motion for first reading, please say aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
We have Councilmember Cutchin opposed. Any other opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention, Councilmember Hopper. Any other abstentions? All right, motion carries. Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2837 for the first time.
Bill number 2837, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute a city consultant agreement with Civil Design Incorporated for professional services to complete the final design of the Main Street Road Extension Project, first reading.
Thank you. Mr. Brown, anything you want to mention further relative to this bill?
Thank you, Mayor Boland. I would just quickly mention that this project has been under design with Civil Design, and they've completed the preliminary plans. We are just wanting to move forward with final design of the project, and that is the contract that is presented for you under this bill for approval tonight. With that, I'm available for any questions from the city council.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Rick or any comments? All right, seeing none, will be on the agenda for second reading at the next meeting. Thank you, Mr. Brown. That takes us to the two first readings we have that arise from the hearings. We had two hearings we had this evening that have favorable recommendation from the city. The first is Bill 2840 that concerns the CUP project here for Town Center and Ward 8. Mr. Benich, anything further you want to mention relative to this bill?
No, sir, but again, I'm available for any questions.
Any questions from any member of the council or any comments? Seeing none, is there a motion for the first reading of Bill 2840? Made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Ottenberg. All in favor of the motion for first reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One opposed. Councilmember McCutcheon. Any other opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, the motion carries. Please read Bill 2840 for the first time.
Bill number 2840, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending ordinance number 2798 and modifying the associated conditional use permit CUP to accommodate a mixed-use development by deleting sections 1 and 4 in its entirety and replacing it with a new section 1 and 4 consistent with the Planning and Zoning Commission's letter of recommendation dated October 2nd, 2023, first reading.
Thank you. Councilor Farmer. You can, if a motion is made and passes by supermajority. Let's handle them one at a time. You want to make a motion for a second reading? Okay, and then seconded by Councilmember Nyan. So to do a second reading, as you may recall, requires at the same meeting requires a supermajority vote of the council, 2/3. We'll try it by voice, see where we get with that, and go from there. All in favor of the motion for a second reading of Bill 2840, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? One opposed. Councilmember McCutcheon. Any other opposed? Any abstentions? The motion for second reading has passed by supermajority. Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2840 a second time.
Bill number 2840, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending ordinance number 2798 and modifying the associated conditional use permit CUP to accommodate a mixed-use development by deleting sections 1 and 4 in its entirety and replacing it with a new section 1 and 4 consistent with the Planning and Zoning Commission's letter of recommendation dated October 2nd, 2023, second reading.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion or comments? Seeing none, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2840.
Councilmember Farmer?
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
No.
Councilmember Rambo?
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher?
Yes.
Councilmember Brost?
Yes.
Councilmember Edens?
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall? Councilmember Jaxi? Councilmember Hopper?
Yes.
Councilmember Galani? Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan.
Okay, so the bill has passed and will be in effect once signed. That takes us to Bill 2840. This also comes from, 2841. Thank you. Which comes from our second, our three hearings this evening. Is there anything you want to add, Mr. Benich?
No, sir, but again, I'm available for any questions.
Okay, seems pretty straightforward here. Is there a motion for the first reading of Bill 2841? Ward 8, made by Councilmember Galani, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. All in favor of the motion for first reading of Bill 2841, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2841 for the first time.
Bill number 2841, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending ordinance number 2060 by deleting the description of the associated service lanes, alleys, as private, consistent with the Planning and Zoning Commission's letter of recommendation dated October 2nd, 2023, first reading.
Thank you. And we had a request from the representative of the subdivision for a second reading on this evening. Councilmember Galani. We have a motion for a second reading. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Clark. Again, this will require a supermajority 2/3 vote. We'll try it by voice vote, see where we get. All in favor of the motion for second reading of Bill 2841 this evening, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Eldridge, please read Bill 2841 a second time.
Bill number 2841, an ordinance of the city of Wildwood, Missouri, amending ordinance number 2060 by deleting the description of the associated service lanes, alleys as private, consistent with the Planning and Zoning Commission's letter of recommendation dated October 2nd, 2023, second reading.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Seeing no further discussion, Ms. Eldridge, please call the roll for final passage of the bill.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Councilmember Ottenberg.
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall, Councilmember Jaxi, Councilmember Hopper,
Yes.
Councilmember Galani, Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan, Councilmember Farmer.
Yes.
Okay, the bill passes and will be in effect once signed. Thank you. All right, that takes us to our consent agenda, and we have the following things on the consent agenda. We have minutes from the last meeting of October 9, 2023 for the work session and regular meeting, the approval of expenditures, our record retention policy, I guess. What is it? Okay, and that is on the consent agenda. Why? City Attorney Young.
Pursuant to state law, any records that are destroyed consistent with the Secretary of State's policy for the destruction of records have to be entered on the journal of the city.
Okay, and I'm assuming these are consistent with that.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Appointments. We have three, moving Mike Lee, who was formerly on our Planning and Zoning Commission. Now he got termed out there. He's on our Board of Adjustment, currently as a alternate, and we have a vacancy in a permanent position. And I think it would be appropriate to move him to that permanent position. That then takes us to Mr. Anthony Reiner, who's with us this evening and has patiently waited in the back. He's from Ward 6 and has indicated an interest in participating on the Board of Adjustment to fill that spot that Mr. Lee will be vacating should the council approve him to do so and move to the permanent spot. And finally, Councilmember Joe Garitano being appointed to the Crossings Community Improvement District, also known as the SID Board, from Ward 8. We have a few resolutions, 2023-21, which relates to requesting the Department of Transportation and Public Works, St. Louis County, to implement improvements to Old State Road. That affects Wards 6, 7, and 8. Resolution 2023-22 relating to a contract between the city with Wildwood Yoga for senior program, and that affects all wards. And finally, Resolution 2023-23 relating to basically codifying the Police Department's current approach of temporary suspension of enforcement and prosecution of outer boundary lines on the white lines. In other words, on a section of State Route 100 that has lots of potholes where you can't see the lines, and that affects Ward 1 and 6. And we've already handled miscellaneous. So those are the items on the consent agenda. If there are no questions or comments, would someone like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Made by Councilmember Galani, seconded by Councilmember Hopper. Any discussion on the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, and Mr. Reiner, I want to thank you so much for your willingness to be part of our team. Welcome aboard, and we look forward to serving with you. So we have handled miscellaneous. That takes us to adjournment of our council meeting, unless someone wants to bring anything up before we do that. Someone want to make a motion to adjourn? Maybe a council member, surprisingly, Councilmember Farmer. I know where to look for the motion for adjournment. And seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. It's a non-debatable motion. All in favor of the motion to adjourn the main meeting of the council, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so that takes us back to our reopening of our work session. And while we've been going through some of these things, I've come up with an idea that I'm going to suggest to the council that I think will allow the council to reach a point more efficiently as to how, when, and where to do things or something with, if anything, with the 1 million excess funds, I call it, that we got. And I've discussed it with our city attorney and our city administrator, and this also accommodates concern on the part of the city administrator that we discussed earlier about the way this should be reflected in the budget that hopefully doesn't look like a deficit. It also avoids the comment mentioned earlier by Councilmember Marshall about trying to do something, in the spur of the moment when more thought might need to be given to it. So with that in mind, this is the proposal I would submit to the council. That a motion be made to move the $1 million provisionally, that means temporarily, to the Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund. And if that then passes, the chronology would go like this. At the next meet, we've already approved the budget, first reading this evening. It'll be approved for 2024, which is what this essentially relates to. It'll be approved presumably at the December meeting at a second reading. So our budget for 2024 will be then in effect. And between now and then, I would recommend that we appoint a 5-member committee to look at options as to what to do with the funds and how to do it, and to make recommendations as to any amendment to the budget that we pass at second reading at the next meeting to be done at our January council meeting. If you want me to go through that again, okay. So tonight, it would be a motion to move the 1 million provisionally into the Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund. We don't need to do anything tonight. We would then, second part of this triad would be to then have the budget pass at the next meeting. And while this is that's all occurring over the coming weeks, we would have a 5-member committee, and I'll give you the names. Hopper, assuming they're willing. Council members Hopper, Dodwell, McCutcheon, Garitano, and Clark, to assess various options with respect to the 1 million. And that will then be presented after the budget's approved in December at the council's meeting in January. And I think this solves 3 of the more salient points I heard this evening relative to this issue. Any questions on that? If there are no questions, would someone like to make a motion? We'll need 2 motions tonight. First, to move the $1 million to the capital, $1,010,000 to the capital improvement, provisionally move to the Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund. And that can be changed later. Made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. Is there any discussion on the motion? See no discussion on that motion. All in favor of the motion? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Marshall. Well, yes, because this will, if anything is done with this money, it will be it has to be done as an amendment to the budget, and the budget hasn't passed yet. So the budget will pass presumably at the next meeting. So right after that, this would come back in January. If they need more time, we can say January or February. If they need more time, I think we got a lot done tonight. My view is we got a lot done tonight with the discussion as to kind of who's where and different ideas and how we might go about it. And I think, I mean, a 5-member group could probably get it done by then, but if not, they can ask for more time and we'll put it on February. Yep. So that was just to move things along. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to provisionally move the $1,010,000 into the city's Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund, effective immediately. Is there any further discussion or questions about that? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
The next of the 2 motions that would be, I'm sorry, Councilmember Edens, I did it again. Were you voting in favor of that?
I was abstaining. I had trouble hearing the council member that asked a question. I think his microphone maybe wasn't on, so I just didn't feel like I had all the information to vote. That's why I abstained.
Let's go down that hole for a moment. So Councilmember Marshall simply asked relative to the formation of the ad hoc committee, what the purpose was for having them come back in January. Could they do that with the holidays? And so we're going to try to do it in January. If they need more time, they can let us know. So that was really all that was about.
Okay, so just to clarify, this is just moving the money. This is not creation of a committee, because I don't necessarily support the committee, but I'm okay.
We're going to get to the committee next.
So this is just moving the money
Correct.
then?
Yes.
And
that's
and the
correct.
money theoretically, internet counts as capital improvement or no?
Internet would cap.
It does, but just because it's being moved to this fund. does
Right,
not
I was
mean
just
it will
making
stay.
sure that it was not excluded as a
It's
potential.
not excluded. It's not. It's not. So do you want to vote in favor of this motion or still abstain?
I will vote in favor.
Okay, so that was unanimous, I believe. All right, and then the next motion would be that the ad hoc committee composed of council members Hopper, Dodwell, McCutcheon, Garetano, and Clark reflect on the conversations from this evening in consultation with our city administrator and potentially with our city attorney, and come back ideally at the January meeting, but no later than the February meeting, for a recommendation to the council as to what to do with the monies. Would someone like to make a motion for that? Made by Councilmember Flasher, seconded by Councilmember Ottenberg. Is there any discussion on the motion? See no discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
Councilmember McCutcheon, I'm sorry, Councilmember Edens and Councilmember Rambo are opposed. Any other opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. And thanks to those council members for being willing to step up and do that. All right. Okay. So that takes care of that. I think that, like I said, I think that'll allow us to just kind of move back from this and get some perspective. So, okay. That takes us to the 2024 City Council calendar. Everyone's had a chance to look at this. Are there any questions or comments about it, or what are you looking for us to do? Approve it? Okay. There are no questions or comments. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the calendar as presented, made by Councilmember Galani, seconded by Councilmember McCutcheon? Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion to approve the calendar as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Deer Management Fund. Who wants to explain that? City Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at the at the Administration and Public Works Committee meeting back in October, a discussion was held regarding the funding sources for the deer management program that we currently have going on. One of the items that was discussed while reviewing the 2024 budget was that the deer management funding would have to come out of the operating budget. In this case, the city is just not bringing in enough revenue to present a balanced operating, along with having the deer management fund being funded, program being funded. So what was discussed was how we could potentially move forward by funding the future years of this. And the options that were presented were that an amendment to the 2024 budget could be made at mid-year, like we did this year, to fund the work we're doing this winter. We could commit monies from the unassigned fund balance, which is the reserves, or there could be an ordinance encumbering the funds for 2023 to move them forward. In this case, the committee decided to recommend the creation of a deer management fund where $1 million would be entered. It would be separate from the capital improvement sales tax fund. It'd be separate from all of our funds. And this fund would pretty much go forward and would be taken out of for all expenses related to deer management until it didn't exist anymore.
So if I may, I'm just going to say a couple of things. One, and I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier, and I say this with all due respect to the members of the committee. This is a new program for us, and we have not even gotten to the point of being able to identify how and whether it will be successful. And putting $1 million in a separate fund at this point might be a little premature, number one. Number two, I'm not sure on a precedent basis the minute we do that, is someone else going to want to do a fund for their thing. So we have the ad hoc performance review committee that I put in my mayor's report relative to deciding whether we want to develop some standards for determining success on this, would there be any sentiment maybe to postponing this until we get a report back from that so we can kind of see what we're dealing with or what? I don't know. It came from the committee. So who wants to speak? Up or down or midway, whatever. Councilmember Nyan. Sure.
Please turn your microphone on.
It is on.
Oh, okay. Couldn't hear what you said.
So this is just creating a separate line item.
Yes.
I don't think it's funding the program. with it.
So this would be not for this year. So in this case, we at mid-year and by ordinance approved, the city council approved an ordinance funding the first year of the program, 216,000. And then in this case, in the 2024 budget right now, the future of the project is not included. So in this case, this year is completely covered though. So we already have a contract and everything.
Councilmember Clark.
Well, would it be, would I be able to make a motion that includes this? Because, I had a list of things to put in a motion that I would make, like that we would fund this entire deer management plan with the unassigned general fund to include the culling, to include the maintenance plan, and but before the culling activity would be would start, that we would have a written plan with the metrics, with the updated baseline data, the measurables, the targets, the SMART goals, and on and on. I could go on for a long time on that, and after the initial white buffalo activity is done this year, we review it again, because that would be part of the plan to make sure that that's what we want to continue with. Could I just make a motion to put all of this in it so we don't postpone?
You could, but I mean, I personally would have a problem signing off on $1 million line item without seeing exactly the results of exactly what you're talking about. I mean, because basically what it seems to me is we're doing is saying almost a foregone conclusion. We know it's going to be positive, so we're just going to, create a line item for this for the tune of $1 million. I'd rather see the results. Number one, see what the defined metrics are. Number two, what the results are, then decide whether to put more money to it. Councilmember Dodd.
I tend to agree with Councilmember Clark in that if we don't set some parameters around and definition around what we're asking this company to do, even though we may adjust them, we may change them at a later time, we have to have something that as we enter into this current year's contract, we can anticipate funding in 2024, because we don't have a definitive answer on how effective this plan is going to be.
Don't disagree, but does that mean we have to allocate $1 million to a line item just for this without having that yet? I mean, we can always do that.
I think we've got enough residents in the city of Wildwood, and we have enough deer in the city of Wildwood, and we've been kicking this can for as long as I've been on council, that I would prefer to have a line item so that we stay committed to, if not this methodology, some methodology going forward on a budgetary basis to ensure that we reduce the population of deer in the city of Wildwood. So that's why I don't care if it goes into a specific department as a specific line item, but I think we have to have something that is an overarching management of this project so that we don't end up 5 years from now spending $5 million and not knowing.
So, I mean, I think if you make a motion to say exactly that, it'd be the intent.
Well, isn't that what Teresa just said?
I think this is on here as to deer management fund. What I'm talking about, and I think I'm hearing both of you say is tell me if I'm wrong, but the intent is to simply codify the city's commitment to this over the long term, subject to success data that we see after we define what that is. And so if that's if that's true, then you could just make a motion to that effect. It doesn't need to be in a separate line item and say 1 million for this. And I mean, it's just, we're committed to it. And this is what, based on success rate.
No, my request is that I want $1 million dedicated to this effort in 2024. Specifically.
So you say something? Councilor Rose.
Yeah, this concept, I think goes in line with a lot of what we've talked about with our reserves, is that if we start to, come up with, and I don't want to have 30 or 40 of them, but, as we have our main projects, if we actually allocate and dedicate funds for a particular project activity, ongoing or one-off projects, I think it will improve the manner on how we can look at our reserves. And if I understand it right, whatever we might allocate to a particular one, whether it be the deer management or public safety or whatever the project might be, we can pull it back. So I just think it's a good exercise. When I read this, my thought still was back to, we should have the same thing for internet. We should have erosion, and whether or not this is the right number or not, I'm not sure. Whatever we would put to erosion, I don't know if it'd be the right number or not, but I think it's a good exercise. And I think it's consistent with everything we've been talking about that we want to do as a council. The
city attorney we're having a sidebar here. I don't think this would be a motion to have this put in place mid-year next year. Is that correct? For the budget?
I thought we were looking to put it in for this year's now.
How it would be presented by the committee would be that the $1 million would be presented as part of the 2024 package. And what you would see is the general funds overall. Actually, I got it right here. The overall number in 2024, it's at 15,403,000. You would see that's our reserves. You would see that general fund balance move down to 14,403,000. And then you would see a separate fund that would have $1 million with an estimated, we would talk with White Buffalo to get the exact number, but we'd get an estimate for what would be spent in 2024. So it would be done on this budget and it would be added to bring back in December. That's what I believe the committee was trying to get at.
Not $1 million for spending.
Yeah, it's not actually spending.
It's just sitting in a pool. We need to do the same thing with erosion control.
Yes,
we need to do
I think
same thing with erosion control.
Go ahead, Councilor Eaton.
Yep. Sorry to cut anybody off, and if I'm repetitive, it's just because I've lost audio on some of your comments. But thanks, Councilmember Rose, for putting it in a way much better than I was going to put it. The committee talked about this ad nauseum, so I think it would be redundant to send it to an additional committee. I think we'd sort of be reinventing the wheel, especially if you weren't a part of the original admin and public works discussion. It'd be a lot of catch up. The reason we did this was not only to show a commitment, but to plan financially. We're talking about spending money in the future, and we've based this estimate on our plan that's going to take multiple years and what it would cost this year. And then we do have an evaluation plan in place with White Buffalo to redo population counts and determine if it works. Again, we don't have to rebuy into a contract if we don't like it. The other thing I just want everyone to keep in mind, and we talked about this in committee, is that yes, this particular council has a commitment to this issue. We're concerned about deer strikes and cars. We're concerned about tick-borne illnesses. that doesn't mean future elected officials will. I've seen that in my time on council, right? So what we're saying is that it's harder to take something away once you give it, right? So we're planning for future councils as well by pushing this through tonight or first reading tonight. And that was another reason why we did it. I cannot count on future elected officials to spend money on this issue or to care about it. But I don't think sending it, to another committee will be helpful. I think it's just going to be talked about as an ad nauseum.
I think the bottom line is the fact that we've made a commitment to the residents, and we've done it for a multiple year plan, and we want them to see, in fact, that we're willing to utilize tax dollars in order to carry out their wishes. And I think that was the reason that we put a number to it. Like everybody said, it can be adjusted at some point, but we wanted residents to know that we are committed to this. It is something the residents really care about. And I believe that was the reason for the dollar amount attached.
Councilmember Clark.
Well, the reason I put it that way when I asked the question about making that motion was because having the written plan was what I was pointing to, especially with a maintenance plan, because we did get the report from Councilmember Rambo, who put this report together that outlines a lot of the metrics involved in it. And I think we could put that together relatively simply if we just took his report and outlined it, along with the white buffaloes. We have to be careful with that, I think, because if in fact we see that isn't as successful as we thought it would be, we don't want to use their metrics always. We need to have our own. But I think that if we have that plan put together, we already have some metrics. We know what we need to do. It's not like we have to invent them at this point. We already know what we need to do. And if we write those down, have a written plan that we're going to follow so that the next year, so if we get new council members that aren't involved with this, they have this plan that ongoing that we're going to reduce the herd. We're going to
But just like and I'm not speaking for or against it at this point, but just like we could change that, any council down the road, this doesn't mean they can't change that. I mean, it's not gonna.
I understand that too, but I'm like Councilmember Dodwell, that we need to commit something to this, and we have a good plan and we have some metrics set up, but on this, not all of the projects, but on this project, we have pretty good idea of what we need to know. And we just need to put it down so that we have our timeline. We have things associated with it. But if we don't have that money in there, it's going to come up the next year and the next year and the next year when this is a full plan. This isn't this year we're going to do some, and then next year maybe we'll do something, or maybe we won't because we didn't have the money allocated for it. And we need to do this whole plan, or our deer population is going to be out of control. It's not going to be maintained if we don't do all the steps. Assuming
the plan. So I'm not saying it won't, but we don't know that yet. Councilmember Marshall.
Yeah, I think part of this is in some of the discussions I sat in with the committee is it's not unusual for the city to have project funds, city hall fund, we did sewer funds, where it just earmarked and then we didn't dump it into the administrative budget. I personally think it should be in public safety budget. But I mean, these are the type of things that we could put the project up, identify it. We sit here and we approve capital budgets for 3 to 5 years. We wouldn't have anything in the capital budget for 3 to 5 years if we don't do something like that. And I totally agree with what Councilmember Clark is saying. It needs to be really structured, and nothing means we have to do it next year. It's the fact that we earmark it, we're committed to it, we watch it, and everybody knows. I had a whole lot more people ask about the deer than I did about trash refunds. I mean, people said, "What can you do?" And then we saw all the deer kills and the cars and that kind of stuff. So I just think if we had it as a project, it would become something that we could focus on and let residents know that we're working on it. And I don't think anybody would question using that, even if that money come out of reserves. That's the kind of thing that hopefully we had reserves for.
Okay, fair enough. I know we got a couple of people. Let's get a motion on the floor. We have some discussion here kind of briefly. So what would be your motion, Councilmember Clark?
The motion would be to create a new fund for the entire deer management plan from the unassigned general fund, to include the culling, the maintenance plan, and initially the written plan with all of those things that Councilmember Marshall just mentioned, and to take the White Buffalo project at the end of this year as a trial to assess the success rate of that. Granted, we have to
Stay with your motion.
I am trying
Okay.
to, in that, we have to provide them what they ask for to make them successful. And I think that's mine.
Okay, is there a second? Second by Councilmember Jaxie. You had your hand, both of you, is it on the motion, germane to the motion?
Mhm.
Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Golan.
Yeah, I guess, so we have the funding for White Buffalo for the deer management for 2016 or 2024 already in place, correct? And this is going to be a trial. We're going to put all these parameters and codify our what we're wanting to do. I guess my question on this is that if we set aside $1 million additional from what we already have budgeted for 2024, and we know this is a trial situation to figure out what they're going to do, and if they're going to do it well, we want to move forward. But we're also going to tell them that we're going to give you whatever you need to be successful. If I'm a business and I know you set aside another $1 million on top of what you already told me you're going to give me, I'm going to come up with a list of additional things that I need you to pay for to make me successful, is what I'm worried about. I'm not saying that they're going to do that, but I feel like we're opening the door for that to happen. Whereas they've come to us and said, this is what we need to be successful in year one to do it. And we've already approved that amount of money. It's in the budget. It's ready to go. I would say that this conversation shouldn't be something that's even entertained until later next year after. And I totally agree with giving them Councilmember Clark's and Councilmember Marshall's parameters on exactly what it is we want to see done, and the metrics by what we want to see the deer population drop by, and all the different, I'm not an expert on a deer, so I'm not going to sit here and try to repeat everything, but I think we should put all that in place, but then let them use the funding we've already approved for 2024 and move forward with the plan they gave us. And then later in the year, see where we're at, how things are going. And then we can take a look, and it's easier to look back at what's happened than try to figure out what's going to happen in the future. And I feel like when you throw $1 million into a fund and say it's going to go towards this, but we have no idea what this is really, we'll figure it out later. And at the same time, we've already agreed per the city attorney that even if we approve this fund to be set up, we can negate that and pull it back and change it later. At the same way that in the future, if we think things are working and we like it, we can always add it in there too. So whether we do something today or not doesn't change anything about whether who's on council in the future or not, or anything like that, as far as I can see it. I think this is a moot point right now, and we need to move forward with what we've already looked at and what we've already decided on, and then put these other pieces in place so we can measure it, which is what we need to do, and then figure this, what we're going to do moving forward once we have some more data to look at.
Councilmember Hopper.
So I'm going to echo a lot of what Councilmember Lonnie said as well. So, but one question I do have, when we're talking about setting up a fund or allocating these, do we have the option to set up a fund or to set up an motion to have it be money that would be moved into a fund on an annual basis rather than dumping $1 million there? Like, well, we're committing to spending up to $250,000 over the next 5 years. That would move into this. And then we have a contingent on successful by your manager, right? But
I think you could do that.
You could technically, you want to?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you could technically do that. Just know that the council has to appropriate every year. So it could be that same ordinance could be negated.
But I think we're talking, some of the concerns is like, we're going to dedicate $1 million to something that we don't know is going to work. We don't know if we're like the company that did it. We don't know if we haven't determined that stuff that has to happen. And yet we're sitting here saying like, we'll go ahead and spend $1 million to it. I agree, I think it's just a little premature, but I also think the thing of like, we want to let residents know we're committed to it, so if we do something that we're gonna ongoing thing, it doesn't put a lot of money up front necessarily per se, but it also commits that we'll look at this next year.
Councilor Jackson, was your hand up?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I don't see this as committing $1 million to White Buffalo. I see this as committing $1 million to an item on our in our priorities that we care about at home. I have to budget money out for what I want long-term. And that's what we're doing here. We're saying we value a plan. Here's some money set aside for it so that we don't have to come back to this every year as a council and find some more money to, because he had to find 214 this year to make it work. This came to the committee to say, can we plan for this long term? Can we plan for this at least for a few more years out and set aside some money so he doesn't have to try to find that in the budget already? So I don't see this as setting aside money just for White Buffalo, but for a plan generically, because the maintenance of this is going to cost money. You're going to have to maintain this. And that's not White Buffalo. That's partially deer hunters. That's partially White Buffalo, maybe. It could amount to a lot of different things, but I think it's important to set the money aside right now.
Councilor Dodwell.
In agreement with Mr. Jaxie here. This is an ongoing process. This will be something just like we repair streets, we repair parks. This is going to be an ongoing maintenance. So therefore, that's why I'm hopefully we'll get a final plan later on how we're going to implement this and how successful White Buffalo was. But if we as a city do not set aside funds for this particular activity, just like repairing roads, just like providing restrooms in our parks. This is a health safety issue. It's a public safety issue. And we just need to assign funds to it on an annual basis.
I don't disagree. It's a safety issue. But the analogy to the road, I think, is a little different in the sense that we know the roads are going to dilapidate at some point. We don't know that this program is going to be successful at any point.
We don't know that this particular design of this program is going to be successful at this point in time. However, if we allocate funds to ensure that we maintain or we minimize the population of the deer right now and work towards a sustainable population going forward, then we have funds available to do whatever we need to do. And the way we do that, it may change from year to year. I don't know.
Councilor Hopper.
What if I paid $50 million budget? So I think in the same vein of saying, like, well, we're committed over the next 5 years to a year state because White Buffalo is really successful, and then next year $75. Now we've got all the millions of dollars in there that again we got to vote and pull back or whatever. Each year we're reevaluating and moving that forward, but it's still getting to it. But each year is together to make that program work.
Okay, we have the motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Roll call vote on the motion, please.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Nyan, Councilmember Farmer,
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Yes.
Councilmember Rambo,
Yes.
Councilmember Flasher,
No.
Councilmember Garrett, or sorry, Councilmember Roast,
Yes.
Councilmember Edens,
Yes.
Member Ottenberg. Councilmember Dodwell,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Jaxi. Councilmember Hopper,
No.
Councilmember Galani.
Given that that is a change, that is a change to the budget,
That is now a change to the budget.
does that need to be codified in an ordinance?
Well, technically, it would be, because we've done a first reading now of the budget, that would be an amendment to the budget that was presented and will have to be brought as an amendment to that bill next meeting.
So basically, we'll be voting on it again. Okay, all right. City recreation schedule, and just so you know, I had a discussion with our city administrator, who I believe talked to Mr. Vintage. This has been apparently some sort of precedent before the council. We can keep it coming before the council if you want. I respectfully don't know that it's a great use of this body's time to be approving a recreation schedule for the city. And so if you're good with it not coming before the board or before the council, going prospectively going forward, that we can do it that way. I think we hire our city administrator and he hires the team to come up with recreation schedules that will be good, but that's up to you. So do you have anything you want to say about the recreation schedule?
The Planning and Parks Committee is presenting their recommended schedule to you tonight for action.
Anyone want to make a motion to approve the recreation schedule made by Councilmember Hopper, second by Councilmember Marshall? Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion? I'm sorry, Councilmember Hopper. It's a great idea. It's a great idea. Without objection, that's what we'll do going forward. Okay. Motion to approve. Do we have a motion on the floor? Yes. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Councilor Edens, were you voting in the affirmative? Yes. Okay. Partner Park, you're looking for a motion to approve 18,000 for demolition. Is that correct, Joe?
That's correct, sir. The
Someone will
city
make-
attorney has reviewed the restrictions associated with the donation and feels we can proceed forward. And if I'm saying that incorrectly, Mr. Young, correct?
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the 18K made by Councilmember Dodwell, second by Councilmember Galani? Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Wildwood Celebration budget for 90,000. Everyone's presumably had a chance to look at that. Any,
Well, with the introduction of the bill tonight for the 2024 fiscal year, this was included as part of it. So if there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
any questions? Are you looking for a motion to approve? I think we have to do that by ordinance.
That's correct,
Yep. Councilmember Clark? Sure.
See the line item, and maybe it doesn't go on this list, but for deafing.
And it should be, what you spent this year,
Yeah, I didn't see that.
because we certainly had them at all of the concert venues and the entire day.
Can you show me, is that on there and I just missed it?
Yeah. I can certainly stay after the meeting and go through it with you.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the proposed? No, I'm getting ready to do that. All in favor of we do have a motion though, I think. Do we have a motion to, okay, thank you, City Clerk, to approve the 90,000 budget. Thank you. Made by Councilmember Flasher, seconded by Councilmember Ottenberg. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Last, the Ad Hoc Project Performance Committee. I mentioned this in one of my mayor's reports, along with the recommended composition of this committee. We've kind of talked a little bit about this tonight, and we seem to talk about it quite a bit. And I, for one, think it would be a great idea that we have performance standards for pretty much everything we do, and particularly the big items. So if you're in agreement with this, would someone like to make a motion to create the Ad Hoc committee along with the composition indicated? Made by Councilmember Hopper, second by Councilmember Nyan. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in Councilmember Clark.
I just want to say thank you for doing that because we definitely need to do this for every project. And just the discussion of the deer management brings up the absolute need.
Well, I want to thank you for being committed to this and keeping it in front of all of us. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that takes us to receipt and files. We have PZ 21-23 and 23-23 that relate, and PZ 11-23 that relate to CUPs approved by, 5-year capital improvement program. That's the first item. Mr. Lee, do you want to say anything further about that?
Available for any questions.
Any questions for the city administrator? All right, seeing none. That takes us to the next three, which are CUPs approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission for solar. These are just receipt and files, but I would ask that just like we did, I believe at the last meeting, if you're so inclined, that someone make a motion to waive the 15-day review period on the part of the council so they can proceed knowing that it will be good. Councilmember Dodwell makes the motion, second by Councilmember Galani. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Probably tomorrow. That takes us to PZ 95-25-97 Sprint Spectrum. Anything you want to mention relative to that, Mr. Benich?
The Planning and Zoning Commission extended the conditional use permit for an additional year. As with any action of the commission relative to a permit of this nature, the city council has the right to exercise power of review if they don't agree with the recommendation, and therefore that power of review will have to be acted upon tonight.
Any questions for Mr. Benich relative to this item? All right, seeing none, that takes us next to PZ 5-22 Kerber. Mr. Benich, anything you want to mention relative to that?
Just again, the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed a request from New Community Church to allow an additional 12 months for the submittal of the site development plan. And the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended that the 12 months be granted. This is for receipt and filing. If there are any questions, the department will be glad to try to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Benich or comment? All right, seeing none, last PZ 28-21 Ashley Grove.
Again, a request for an additional 12 months to submit the required site development plan by the residential developer. The Planning and Zoning Commission to consider the request and granted such, and therefore it is before the city council tonight for receipt and filing.
All right, any questions for Mr. Benich? Seeing none, that takes us to adjournment. Councilmember Clark.
Since we didn't have a miscellaneous to speak at in the council meeting, can I have a miscellaneous now?
Sure, go ahead.
Well, I got this little booklet in the mail and I've never seen this before, but it just came to me. It's called a Scout Guide for St. Louis, Missouri. And I just wanted to mention that we have our own R&R Ranch is in the Rolfs Ranch in this guide, which I thought was very interesting, and that we're published because of our residents.
Ward 1. No, actually they got moved. Ward 3. Yeah, that's right. Okay, anything further under miscellaneous? Councilmember Hopper. We have a motion. We have a motion to adjourn made by Councilmember Hopper, seconded by Councilmember Galani. Non-debatable motion. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye. Any opposed?